What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Limited Resources. This episode number 665. My name is Marshall. I'm one of your Limited Resources, and joining me on the line all the way from Denver, Colorado, it's Luis Scott-Vargas. Luis, welcome to Set Review Day.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to this. I had to push it off a few days due to the cold I got, but now, of course, I'm coming down with something else. So it's a banner month here. But
it really never ends for you this month. Yeah.
Well, actually, we just started a new month, so maybe we're starting out on the right foot. I am looking forward to this set review, though. This looks like a really sweet set, and I'm excited to get into Dominaria. It's also one of the best settings. So
that's right. So we are all set up for this. We're back in action, right? We've got the normal set coming out here for fall, and it's Dominaria United. The expectations are very high for this set, and we're going to do the set review today and see where it lands, at least as far as our initial impressions go. Before we get into the commons and uncommons for Dominaria United, let's talk about our sponsors. First up, channelfireball.com. Make sure to check them out for anything you need Magic related, Dominaria United included. If you want to get pre-orders or whatever, sealed product or singles, you can head over to Channel Fireball and order that up. There's an affiliate code that you can use as well. It's LR at checkout. We do appreciate you doing that. And while you're there, make sure you check out the awesome content available over at CFB as well. There's Freeside and CFB Pro if you're looking to really up your game, get down and dirty with some of the detailed stuff that really you put in the work and you start to see the results on the other side when you start picking up tournaments, start beating people you used to not beat. That's a good place to do it, CFB Pro, where you can learn from some of the very best players in the world. We thank Channel Fireball for their sponsorship of the show. The show's also brought to you by FTX. That's a place to manage all of your digital assets. This is a safe, regulated place to do so. If you are in the United States, you will use ftx.us. If you're outside, it's ftx.com. And there is an app for your phone as well, regardless of where you're at. And this is the best way for you to manage your digital assets. As we move forward into the future, there is, you're going to need to do this at some point. And when you're ready, when you're feeling like, you know what, okay, I want to check this whole thing out, see what's going on in this space, FTX will be there for you. And if you do want to do any investing or anything like that of any kind, we do recommend that you consult an investment professional ahead of time, as there is risk inherent in that, and you're going to need to know that and understand the risk before you do. But when you're ready, FTX is ready for you, and you can check them out at ftx.com outside the US and ftx.us within. The show is also brought to you by you via the Patreon. It's patreon.com/limited resources. If you'd like to support the show directly, that's the best place to do so. Everybody who signs up gets a thank you card, as well as a limited resources sticker for your laptop, your water bottle, or car, or whatever in the mail. No matter what level you sign up for, you are going to get that. That was just something that we wanted to set up as a way to say thanks for supporting us. It's patreon.com/limited resources if you want to check that out. Luis, before we get into the cards, we are going to be giving these cards a grade, and we use a grading scale for that.
We do. Our grading scale goes A through F with 2 subgrades, and we're going to start at the top here. The A's are bombs, game winners, cards that are good in many situations, especially when behind, and just overall the best cards in the set. We're talking cards like Sanctuary Warden or Arbiter of the All-Seeing, the cards that you pump the fist when you open them. B's are cards that actively pull you towards their colors, headliners for a set, go-to cards, and reasons to be in a particular color, clan, guild. In this case, Dominaria is a 2-color format with all the kicker and multicolor stuff, pushing you to 3, 4, even 5 colors. B's are cards that make you want to be their colors. So you're talking cards like Corpse Appraiser and Lagrella. C's are playable. These are the pawns of limited. They're fairly interchangeable, and you're going to end up with a fair amount of them in your deck, just overall. These are cards like Backup Agent, Echo Inspector, Glamorous Outlaw. D's are sometimes playable, but you're a little unhappy if you do run them. They're mediocre to junky cards. Maybe they're situational or expensive. They're cards that make the cut, but you're not thrilled about it. Dapper Shieldmate, High-Rise Sawjack are examples of such. And Fs are cards that are unplayable in virtually all scenarios. You should just never have an F in your deck. These are cards that cost 12 mana or cards that just do something completely nonsensical like Evolving Door. I mentioned 2 subgrades. So one is sideboard. So these are cards that you wouldn't main deck, but out of the sideboard can be quite strong. Your Naturalizes and Plummets. And then there's build-arounds. These are cards that don't do much on their own, but of course can be quite good if you build around them. These are cards like Maestro's Ascendancy or Widespread Thieving. These are cards that if you do the work, they give you the reward, but you can't just stick them in any deck and have them do some good stuff.
Okay, so there you go. We're going to be putting those grades on. Of course, it's worth noting that the grades are just a way to kind of encapsulate everything that we have, but they don't tell the whole story. If you want the whole story, you got to listen to this show. And since you're doing that right now, good job. We're going to start off with what we normally would call the signpost uncommons. These are the gold uncommons that will often kind of give you a strong hint as to where a color pair is going to go on sets like this that are designed around pairs of colors. And we're going to do that here. They're a little different though. There's actually 2 for each color pair, and they're both legendary creatures. So we'll see. I don't know how signposty these will end up being by the time we're done, but we'll find out shortly. So our first card up then would be Raph, Weatherlight Stalwart. This is white blue for a 1/3 legendary human wizard. Again, this whole set is this whole brick of gold cards are all uncommon, so I'm not going to mention that. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, you may tap 2 untapped creatures you control. If you do, draw a card. All right. And it has activated ability 3 white. Creatures you control get +1/+1 and gain vigilance until end of turn.
It's kind of 2 things going on here. On the one hand, it wants you to play with instants and sorceries, right? So you can start tapping creatures to draw a card based on them. But on the other hand, it also wants you to kind of go wide with creatures getting +1/+1 and vigilance. And of course, even the instant and sorcery thing requires 2 untapped creatures. Though note, Wrath can be one of those creatures. Mm-hmm. So it kind of plays into a combination of spells and go wide, with the go wide being a bigger part of the card because you don't need that many spells before this card does some good work.
Particularly instants, right?
Yeah.
Where you can have your creatures up to block and then cast something on their end step and get the additional card out of it.
Yeah, it makes the tapping cost a lot less of a cost.
Right. I did think it was cool that they had vigilance as part of the activated ability, but it's 5 mana. So how often are you going to be able to give vigilance, get an attack in, and then still also play an instant on your or sorcery after that? That's a lot of mana. Probably not going to happen that often. Also, card doesn't have flying. He's got a bit of a cape and it's blue-white, so it might make you think, but it's not. It's just a 1/3 on the ground. So a little understated, for a 2 mana card that's 2 different colors. Still seems good though, right? I mean, like you said, this doesn't really make you work that hard, and that activated ability is a game ender.
Yeah, no, I think Wrath is quite strong. I mean, when your opponent plays this, early, you kind of want to kill it because if they have 2 creatures in play, all of a sudden they'll cast a spell and just draw an extra card.
Yeah.
And you'll feel really bad about that. But then late game, it's also just this huge threat where they can just pay 5 mana. And the vigilance does matter there because it lets you just all out attack without worrying about, a counter swing.
That's right. You also can do this on your opponent's turn, but, right. It doesn't say during sorcery or whatever. Yeah. You also could do it twice. So anyway,
10 mana.
Yeah, might be dreaming a little. I like B for Raph, Weatherlight Stalwart. Looks really solid to me.
I would give the Stalwart a B+, but yeah, strong card.
Tura Kennerud, Sky Knight. A little bit of German in there too. 2 white, blue. Wow, so that's 5 mana for a 3/3 flying legendary human knight. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, create a 1/1 white soldier creature token. So you got a 5 mana 3/3 flyer that does give you a significant benefit, but it's a little hard to set up. You have to cast instants or sorceries after this thing's already on the battlefield.
And the mana cost is pretty punishing.
That is rough.
Double blue, single white is a lot. I mean, that's what the cycle is. There's the 2 color card, and then there's the one that had cost 3 or whatever. But yeah, I'm not a big fan of Tura Kennerud. Just having it be this expensive and then needing spells afterwards. Like imagine if you have 5 mana, but 2 planes, 4 planes on an island, you can't cast this. You're going to feel pretty bad when you finally cast this and have nothing else to play. So I would play this in blue-white if I had sufficient spells, but it looks more like a C- level card to me.
It does to me too, primarily based on the the mana cost. But by the way, so we do get a very clear picture here that blue-white is actually the instant or sorcery care about color. Normally that would be reserved for blue-red, but you can see that it's over in blue-white this time. All right, that moves us to the blue-black pair. First one up is Vohar Voldalian Desecrator. That's the straight-up blue-black for a 1/2. It's a legendary Phyrexian merfolk wizard, so a lot going on there. It has 2 activated abilities. One of them is tap, draw a card, then discard a card. If you discarded an instant or sorcery card this way, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. Okay. And then the other activated ability is to sacrifice this guy. You may cast target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard this turn. If that spell would be put into your graveyard, exile it instead, and you can only activate this at sorcery speed. Nice.
Yeah, note that you do have to cast it. It's not for free, so you're paying 2 plus the cost of the spell.
To Snapcaster it, basically?
Yeah, it's a 2-mana looter that's a 1/2. Doesn't cost you any mana to loot. And when you're discarding spells, which you don't really want to do, but when you are, you drain them for 1. And then later in the game, you just cash in for a spell.
Incredible.
Yeah. Looks strong. Vohar looks like a B to me. And blue-black also has some amount of self-milling going on. So this kind of plays nicely with that.
Yeah, I'll go B+ on Vohar Voldalian Desecrator. 2-mana looters are incredible if you can get them down. Vohar's friend is Rona Sheoldred's Faithful. This is 1 blue-black for a 3/4 legendary human wizard. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, each opponent loses 1 life. Whenever you cast Rona Sheoldred's Faithful from your graveyard, you may cast this card from your graveyard by discarding 2 cards in addition to paying other costs. Wow. That's a steep cost, of course. By the time you get down and you want to get your 3/4 somewhat vanilla-ish creature back onto the battlefield, discarding 2 cards is pretty steep, but that will come up occasionally.
Yeah, I think that being able to bring it back is nice, and just the fact that it pays you again for doing some of the spell stuff that you already are interested in doing seems pretty good. I mean, you're eventually going to get to discard like 2 lands if the game goes long enough. Like, it's the sort of thing where your opponent plays a Rona and you can maybe deal with it. You're still kind of like, this is going to be a problem at some point. It's kind of annoying. Yeah, definitely. And you can plan around it, right? You can just say, well, I don't have anything that costs more than 5 in my deck. I'll just hang on to lands after that, or in effect, spells that aren't very good, and boom, I can get Rona back. Question is, how good is Rona? 4-mana, 3/4 with like an okay triggered ability, right? Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery. Solid. Yeah, pretty solid, right? So I don't know. This to me looks like a C+, B- range card. Where do you have it? I would give Rona a B-. I think Rona is going to be a strong part of blue-black decks, but of course the casting cost does limit it a little bit. Okay. That moves us to red-black, which is Lagomos Hand of Hatred. This one's 1 red-black for a 1/3 human shaman. At the beginning of combat on your turn, create a 2/1 red elemental creature token with trample and haste. Sack it at the beginning of the next end step, and you can tap and search your library for a card, put it into your hand, and then shuffle, but you can activate only if 5 or more creatures died this turn. Wow. Okay, so that second ability isn't going to come up very often, but you have a 3-mana 1/3 that just spits out a 2/1 trample haster every turn that dies at the end of turn. But I mean, it just, starts slamming them. You play this on 3, you immediately get to attack them, and then it gives you outlets for, any sack effects like a bone splinters or what have you. Right. And at some point you might be able to line up where like you make the token, you attack with it, they trade for one of your other creatures, and then you cast post-combat kind of like a bone splinter sacking your other thing, and then you let the token die end of turn, and then you can tap it and use this. You have to have if you're playing on Arena or Magic Online, you got to have a stop set in order to do that. But yeah, you can get some good value out of this card. Yeah, this seems good. I mean, and any death triggers or anything like that, sacrifice triggers, anything like that is going to be kind of easy money here for Lagomos. I like B for Lagomos Hand of Hatred. Yeah. I just feel like there's going to be enough use for these random 2/1s. If you do absolutely nothing, this card's more like a C+, but I imagine most red-black decks will have at least a couple of things that do some good, synergizing with the ability here. Yeah, and then it is interesting that you can demonic tutor if 5 things died. And you don't have to sack this card, by the way. You just tap. It's just an activated ability, so keep an eye out for that. Next,
Lagomos' friend is called Garna, Bloodfist of Kel. This one's 1 black, red for a 4/3 legendary human berserker. And whenever another creature you control dies, so there you go, Lagomos, draw a card if it was attacking. Otherwise, Garna, Bloodfist of Kel deals 1 damage to each opponent.
Yeah, I mean, this
Nice.
is a strong card where no matter what, you get value whenever one of your creatures dies, and it's a 4-mana 4/3. Granted, that 4 is not the easiest to cast in the world, but still does some good work there.
Really annoying card for sure. I like B for Garna.
Yeah,
Looks super solid. The mana cost is the only thing. I think it would go B+ if it wasn't such a difficult card to cast.
yeah, and I think that's something to keep in mind with this cycle of like RRB cards or whatever. That the mana cost is going to be a big deal. So don't think it's free. Obviously, it's not. It's still a card. You're going to put this in your red black deck, and if you're straight red black and you're like 9/8, 9 mountains, 8 swamps. Say when you have 4 mana, you'll be able to play this most of the time. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you won't, and those sometimes make it go down a little in grade. But yeah, I like B for Garna, Bloodfist of Keld.
Yeah, I think a good rule of thumb would be to add a mana or a mana and a half to the cost and figure that's about on average when you're going to be able to get it down. Like you won't always be able to cast Garna on turn 4. Like that's a good rule of thumb. Next one is Rada, Coalition Warlord. This one's 2 red-green for a 3/3 legendary elf warrior with Domain. And Domain, well, I'll just read it. It says, whenever Rada Coalition Warlord becomes tapped, another target creature you control gets +X until end of turn, where X is the number of basic land types among lands you control. And whenever you see the word domain, that means it's going to check for number of basic land types among lands you control, and then it'll apply that to some ability. In this case, it's primarily when this thing attacks, but if it becomes tapped for any reason, you get to pump up another creature quite a bit. And it's actually a lot too, because I mean, even if you're just straight up in green-red, you're getting +2/+2 on some other creature whenever this thing attacks at the minimum.
Yeah, which kind of, if you think about it, makes this like 5/5 worth of stats while attacking. Of course, Rada is a little bit more vulnerable, but when you have creatures like this, you can fill your deck for you have pump spells or removal to clear the path. And in a domain deck that's giving +3/+3 or +4/+4, of course, it goes kind of nuts. I like B for Rada Coalition Warlord.
I would say B, B-. Next is Rulik Mons, Warren Chief. This better be a goblin. 1 red, green for a goblin. It's a 3/3. So 4 mana 3/3 with Menace. And whenever Rulik Mons attacks, look at the top card of your library. If it's a land card, you may put it onto the battlefield tapped. If you didn't put a card onto the battlefield this way, create a 1/1 red goblin creature token. That's great.
And it's funny, if you want, you can decline to put the land into play to get the goblin if you're like in one of those kinds of games where you just need a blocker or what have you.
Yeah. So where does the land go if you don't? Does it stay on top?
Yeah, it just stays on top.
Okay. So that's an interesting, you'll want to clear that land away most of the time. But that's a real thing. And the fact that it has Menace is absolutely key here, right? Because that means that you actually are likely to get to turn Rulik Mons sideways a couple of times before your opponent can set up their defenses. And you're in red-green. I mean, you have pump spells at the ready. You have burn spells. You have ways to break up double blocks pretty easily too. So this is the type of card that can apply a lot of pressure.
Yeah, I like Rulik Mons, and the Menace goes a long way.
Yeah, I like B for Rulik Mons. It's
Same.
leaning towards B+ for me, where Rada was leaning towards B-, but they both get a B for me. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with that. Okay. Looking at Queen Alanal of Ruadach, quite the mouthful. It's a white, green. So this is the double pip, single pip one. It's an elf noble. Its power and toughness are equal to the number of creatures you control, and it counts itself. So it starts out as a 1/1. And if one or more creature tokens would be created under your control, those tokens plus a 1/1 white soldier token are created instead.
Oh. Wow. So this is like turbo token card.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, just a vanilla creature on its own, right? It really, like, most likely this is going to be a build around. There have been sets where putting a creature whose power and toughness is equal to the number of creatures you control was actually like playable or even just okay. But even then, even in heavy token sets, those usually end up being like C minuses or C's, occasionally a C plus. And this one's really difficult to cast, so it's going to be really tough for it to get there. This is actually approaching build around for me.
Yeah, I think you would need a good amount of the ways to use the second part before you would be too interested in playing this.
Right. It doesn't have trample,
Well, it's funny because if the first part's good, the second part's probably also good. It's kind of hard to not have these not be in lockstep. Looks like a build around B to me. If you've got enough, ways to make tokens, then this card will do some good work. If you don't, well, this card's not going to do that much.
Yeah, I like B for that. What does Zar Ojanen do?
Zar Ojanen, Scion of Efraba.
Wow.
3 white-green for a 4/4 legendary cat warrior. Whenever Zar Ojanen becomes tapped, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control with toughness less than the number of basic land types among lands you control. So it's domain. So when this attacks or becomes tapped, I guess you could tap it to another effect, but it's when it becomes tapped, all of your creatures who have toughness less than the number of land types. So probably if you're 3 colors, all your 2 toughness creatures get a +1/+1 counter. This one seems like it's asking a lot of you. It's a 5-mana 4/4, which is not great stats to start with. And then it has to survive long enough to attack. And then you have to have probably 3 land types in order to just be on the board with this ability happening.
Yeah, the way I translate this is this cares about 1/1 tokens.
That is part of it for sure, yeah.
Like if you have 2 1/1 tokens and you get to turn this sideways, they pick up the counters, and that's kind of the joke. And it also lines up with Queen all in all. So this looks built around to me as well, though, and a little more on the fragile side too. Maybe you're going to be playing 3 colors more often, but most of the 2 color sets, they really kind of lean you towards 2 colors. If you want to have Queen all in all and Zar Ojanen in your deck, you do need to have a lot of white sources. It's going to kind of squeeze out some of the potential splash options that you may have as well. So I like build around B- for Zar Ojanen. It seems a little narrow.
That's exactly where I would go.
All right. Elas Ilkor, Sadistic Pilgrim, is the first of the black whites. This is black white for a 2/2 legendary Phyrexian core cleric with death touch. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 1 life. Whenever another creature you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life. So these type of cards tend to do actually quite well. And this one's got a nice twist on it. Just stuff ETBing on your side gains you life, which is pretty nice.
Yeah, Elas Alcor is fantastic. I mean, this is the kind of card when it's in play, your opponent feels like they're losing, and that's accurate. And it's got death touch, so you can just cash it out for blocking their 4/4 or whatever. Right. There's just no situation where this is bad. If the board's stalled, you're slowly gaining life and draining them, and if the board isn't well, then this actually is a combat piece. So I like B+ for Elas. Yeah,
I like that too. It just has a really high floor. Aaron Benalia's Ruin is white, black for a 3/3 legendary Phyrexian human with menace. So 3 mana, 3/3 menace. And then it has activated ability of black, white, tap it and sacrifice another creature to put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control.
Fantastic. I mean, this is just, again, hard casting cost. And the casting cost punishes you a lot more on 3 mana than it does on 6, right? If this was a 5/5 flyer that costs white, black 3. Well, in a white-black deck, when you have 6 mana, you can cast it. Here, you won't necessarily be able to cast it on turn 3. So you got to keep that in mind. But a 3/3 menace for 3 that also lets you sack a creature and turn it into like 2, 3, 4, maybe more +1/+1 counters across your team. That's awesome.
That's great. And it works, of course, with its friend Elas Ilkor. So yeah, really awesome card. And I really like the dynamic of it's like if you get it down on turn 3, you just smash with it like 3 times before they can really set up blocks, and then you start sacking stuff to build up your board. I like that dynamic. A little awkward to have such a great attacker have a tap activated ability on it, but whatever. It just gives it a great late game.
I like when it's good, it'll be good,
Yeah, this one's B+, and it could be in the A- range depending on if it's fully supported or not.
Yeah, I would have it closer to B plus than A minus, but fantastic card.
Yeah, Aaron Benalia's Ruin B plus. That moves us to blue red. Let's see if the instants and sorcery things is happening here too. This is Balmor Battle Mage Captain. This is blue red for a 1/3 legendary bird wizard with flying. And whenever you cast an instant or sorcery, there you go. Spell, creatures you control get +1/+0 and gain trample until end of turn. This feels extremely blue-red, right?
Yeah.
The like being able to pile on a bunch of damage in kind of a flurry and, off and off of like one or two evasive threats. Balmor Battle Mage Captain just fits the bill perfectly.
I mean, this just has mini prowess by itself.
Right.
And then if you have one other creature, getting 2 points of power plus trample for every spell you play,
yeah,
it's fantastic.
Yeah. I like B for Balmor Battle Mage Captain.
I would go B plus for the Battle Mage.
Lots of damage coming over.
This reminds me of Adeli's Cinder Wind. When you just have this out early, your opponents are just not going to be happy about it.
That's right. And yeah, giving it to your whole team is a major benefit. Najal the Storm Runner is 2 blue, blue, red for a 5/4 legendary Ifrit wizard with no flying. You may cast sorcery spells as though they had flash. Okay, little bonus. And whenever Najal the Storm Runner attacks, you may pay 2. If you do, when you cast your next instant or sorcery spell this turn, copy it. You may choose new targets for the copy. Wow. You don't need to do that too many times before you're way, way ahead in the game.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and you're not really even paying that much as a 5-mana 5/4. So I think Najal the Stormrunner is awesome. It seems really easy to use nicely and a huge threat for the opponent without having to pay too much in terms of cost.
Setup cost and everything. Yeah. I'm on B for Najal the Stormrunner.
Yeah, I like B for this.
Urg, Spawn of Turg, is black, green for a star 5 legendary frog beast. Urg's power is equal to the number of land cards in your graveyard. Yikes. At the beginning of your upkeep, look at the top card of your library. You may put that card into your graveyard. Oh, there's some business. It also has activated ability black, green, sack a land, you gain 2 life.
So you play this, it's a 3-mana like 0/5, and then when you scry, when you surveil lands into your graveyard, you get to, it gets to get bigger.
And you get rid of lands that theoretically you don't want.
Yeah. I don't think this is terrible especially if your deck wants an 0/5 to start with, like if you don't mind a defensive card, but it's not a great card. I would say this is a C. Yeah,
that's how it feels to me. It's kind of like, where are we going? Like, my big payoff is I get this to be a 4/5, like in a bunch of turns later. That's not great. I mean, the payoff is that you get to surveil every turn. That's the main payoff. Like, how much would you pay? Like, how often would you pay for a 3-mana 0/5 that surveils every turn? Like, that's not. No, you're right. I didn't think of it like that. If you put it like that, then I like it more. And then getting to cash in lands to gain life when you're losing a race or something, could be good. Obviously, once you start doing that, you're making it less likely you win in the future, but you got to do what you got to do. So I think Urg Spawn of Turg is solid. Okay, so C+? I would still give it a C, but I don't think you have to I don't think you should avoid this card. I think it's a solid playable. All right. What about Bortuk Bone Rattle? This is 4 black green for a legendary troll shaman at 4/4. And it's got domain. When it enters the battlefield, if you cast it, choose a creature in your graveyard, return that creature to the battlefield if its mana value is less than equal to number of basic land types. Otherwise, put it in your hand. So it's a 6-mana Gravedigger, and then sometimes it'll end up, casting it for free. Solid card. Again, it reminds me a little bit of the black-green 4/5 that return 2 creatures, for 6 mana that we had a couple sets ago or many sets ago. Yeah. And this only gets you 1, but sometimes it'll get it for free if you're a domain deck with 3 different types, which isn't, I think, very hard. Play this and then put a 3-drop into play for free. Pretty happy about that, I would say. Yeah, this looks like a nice top end for these type of decks. And, the real question is there enough self-mill to support these cards? Right, because if you start off by just dumping a third of your library into your graveyard, then cards like Urg and Bortuk Bone Rattle just become fantastic, right? But if it's difficult to get those cards in there, or if you're only doing it during the normal course of play, then they vary a lot more. I like B- for Bortuk Bone Rattle. I'm going a little bit off of old Dominaria, but if it's grindy, this is the type of card that can really perform.
I would just give it a straight B. I think that the Bone Rattle will do the job.
Okay. Next is red-white. This is Baird Argivian Recruiter. It's red-white for a 2/2 legendary human soldier. At the beginning of your end step, if you control a creature with power greater than its base power, oh, that's fun, create a 1/1 white soldier creature token. So if you augment your creature in any way, you give it a pump spell. If it has an enchantment or an equipment,
a +1/+1 counter.
That's cool. That's really cool. I've never seen that.
Yeah, and it's a 2-mana 2/2, which is not a bad place to start. I would say that this is a C+.
Yeah, I like this. C+, B-, depending on how much you build around Baird. Tori Davenant Fury Rider. This is 1 red, white for a 3/3 Vigilance Trample legendary human knight. Whenever Tori attacks, all other attacking creatures you control get +1/+1 until end of turn. Well, that's excellent. Other red attacking creatures you control gain trample. Untap each other white attacking creature you control. So effectively, vigilance to your white creatures, trample to your red, and +1/+1 to all of them. And this has vigilance and trample itself. Wow.
Yeah. Again, punished a little more in the casting cost than some of the less aggressive ones, but still I think quite strong. And you're happy to play this in all your red white like token style decks. So I like B- for Tori Davenant just based on casting cost mostly.
Yeah, same. Those I'm curious to see how good aggro is in this format, and those two cards are very strong with the whole token theme. That brings us to the best color pair, blue-green. Tatiova, Steward of Tides, green, blue for a 3/3 legendary merfolk druid. Land creatures you control have flying. Okay, I like where that's going. Whenever a land enters a battlefield under your control, if you control 7 or more lands, up to 1 target land you control becomes a 3/3 elemental creature with haste. It's still a land. Oh, it just becomes that. And it also has flying? Wow.
Yeah, so you end up, it's always going to pump or make all your lands have flying, and then it starts making lands into creatures once you hit your 7th. So not as good as the original Dominaria Tatiova, but still strong.
And it's up to 1, so you don't have to turn your lands into creatures if you don't like.
Yeah, if you think that would be a bad idea for some reason, though unlimited, I don't think that's going to happen.
No, I think you're going to turbo as many as you can. Interesting that this card only costs 3 mana, right? It's actually quite a bit down the line before it starts doing anything, unless you have a bunch of other lands that are somehow creatures, in which case it's giving them flying. I don't know. If you can turbo land with this, that seems great, but there's a decent amount of games where you never get to 7 lands.
Yeah, I would say that
B-, C+, I don't know.
I think B-. Look, when you play this on turn 7 and then play a land, it's pretty good. Like
it's insane.
You're gonna end up being pretty happy with how that worked out.
Definitely. What about Nael Avizoa Aeronaut?
So this is 2 blue-green for a 2/4 elf scout. It's got flying, and it's got domain. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you look at the top X cards, or X of the number of land types you have, put 1 on top of your library and the rest on the bottom in a random order. Then, if you have 5 basic land types, draw a card. So 4 mana, 2/4 flying with a minor ability like of getting to, put the best of your top 3 or 4 cards or whatever on top of your deck. But once you hit 5 land types, it's all just straight up draw the best card of your top 5, which is pretty awesome.
That's incredible, obviously.
Also, a 4 mana 2/4 flyer is still a solid deal. There's been power creep and all that, but a 4 mana 2/4 flying is just not a weak card. So
right.
I like Nail. I would give Nail a B- and try to domain it up. This is one of the ones that really pushes you to get to 5. Whereas some of them, like you're on 3, that's fine. This one, no, you really want to be 5 because the power level jumps significantly. Whereas you remember Bortuk Bone Rattle, the Grave Digger. Mm-hmm. You just play that in your black-green deck. You don't care about the domain part very much.
No, because you're getting a card back either way. Yeah.
Yeah, this card's really high on that.
Yeah. Yeah, and also it sets the dream, right? I want to have all 5 colors of basics on the battlefield. Okay, let's move over to blue. We started with white during our last set review, so we're going to move to blue here as our first main color. First card up is Combat Research. This is blue for an enchantment aura. It's uncommon. It enchants a creature. The creature has, whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, draw a card, and as long as enchanted creature is legendary, it gets +1/+1 and has ward 1 as well.
So,
man, that's a lot.
Original Dominaria had some of this kind of stuff going on too, and I'm not really that impressed with it. Mm-hmm. I don't really like the this has to be legendary in order for this thing to be good. And by itself, combat research is not really good enough. You'd have to have like a 1/1 flyer, and even then, that sort of thing doesn't come together as often as you might like. So
yeah,
I have combat research at a D. I don't think particularly playable.
Even with all the legendaries, it's just not great.
Also, the legendaries, they're not that cheap usually. And
no, they also have activated abilities. Also, you don't necessarily want to put them into combat. Like, it feels like a miss. Even with power level.
D for combat research. I love the next one though.
All right. What is
Pixie Illusionist is blue for a 1/1 fairy wizard. It's a common, and it's got flying. It has kicker of 3 and a green, and if you kick it, it enters the battlefield with 2 +1/+1 counters on it. So it's a fairy squadron callback from Invasion, where 1 mana 1/1. This even base has flying. The squadron didn't. And then if you pay it for 5 mana, it's a 3/3. But it also has a Dream Thrush callback from Invasion as well, which is tap target land you control becomes the basic land type of your choice until end of turn. So what's cool about this card is you play it early and it fixes your domain stuff. Right. Let's say you have an opening hand that has 2 islands and this, and then a green card as your 2-drop. Well, you play this turn 1. Turn 2, you make it into a forest. You play a land, and then later in the game, you just play it as a 5 mana 3/3 flyer. I think this card's really sweet. It just does what kicker is supposed to do, where you get an early drop that has an ability, and then later in the game, it gets more powerful as you can kick it.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. They did though change it to the modern style.
Yes, they did.
You can't mess with your opponent's lands, because that was a thing Dream Thrush did, right? It was like on your upkeep. This card seems great. It is a gold card though, right? Like, and are you ever going to play Pixie Illusionist just blue 1/1 with this land augmenting ability, but no ability to kick it?
Well, no, because the land augmenting ability really is only good in domain decks, and those decks can, almost by definition, kick this thing at some point.
They're also blue-green based, I think, so.
You could end up with like a blue-white Flyers deck that has combat research, and you're really trying to do that thing, but I don't think that's going to happen very often. I think mostly this is a blue-green card. You should evaluate it as a blue-green card, and it helps multicolor decks. I actually like C+ for Pixie Illusionist. Okay. I think it's got some legs here.
All right, C+ for Pixie Illusionist. Next is Rona's Vortex. This is blue for an instant at uncommon. It has kicker for 2 and a black, and it says return target creature or planeswalker you don't control to its owner's hand. If this spell was kicked, put that permanent on the bottom of its owner's library instead. So if you can pay 2 blue-black, you can get rid of something as straight up instant speed removal spell, putting it on the bottom of their library. But even if you can't, you can still bounce a planeswalker or a creature for just blue.
Yeah, I mean, I would look at this as a blue-black gold card that sometimes you in a pinch you can cast for 1 mana.
Yeah.
Though it is worth noting that this is the kind of card you would play in a deck that, let's say a blue-red deck that cares about spells and doesn't mind this, and then later maybe you have 1 or 2 sources of black so you can get like the additional value from it.
Right. Yeah, and as a removal spell, it is quite strong, although 4 mana is a lot and it's gold, so it's hard to put it too high. But this looks like a C+ B- range removal spell if you can kick it.
I think it's if you're a blue-black deck, because it's a 4 mana removal spell or a 1 mana bounce spell. That's some good power and flexibility. And outside of blue-black, it's closer to like a C+.
Yeah. Okay. Shore Up is blue for an instant. It's common. It says target creature you control gets +1/+1 and gains hexproof until end of turn, and untap it.
This card is a card that we will both be losing to a fair amount, I would imagine.
And playing not that often.
Yes, also that.
Yeah.
It's a strong card, though. This is a good combat trick. Like, it protects from spells with hexproof. It protects from combat if you have equivalently sized creatures with +1/+1. And then the untap means you can even ambush something. I think this is a lot for 1 mana. I would say this is a C.
Yeah, I want to know how it matches up against the removal that everybody plays, because if the removal costs 4 or 5 mana, then cards like Shore Up end up being quite good. And if it costs 2 or 3, then they end up being like less good. I would give it a C, or maybe a sideboard card or something like that. Okay. Timely Interference is blue for an instant. Target creature gets 1/-0 until end of turn. But if it was kicked and the kicker is 1 and a red extra, that creature blocks this turn if able, and then they kind of bury the lead here. You get to draw a card regardless.
This card's awesome. I think this card is not only powerful, but it's going to play in a really sweet way. So let's say you attack with your 2/2 into their 2/2. You're playing, blue. They're often not going to block because of timely interference, even the threat of it. And then you play something else. But then if they ever line things up where they're trying to not get into combat and you have red mana, you can just make them get into combat.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It's really sick.
It is. It makes me just want to block because they're going to have it one way or the other if they have access to these two colors.
I would give timely interference a B-. I think the card it's
wow.
The floor of a 1 blue casting cost card that cycles is pretty high.
That's true, especially because there's multiple decks that we've seen blue-white and blue-red both care about casting instants and sorceries, and this lets you do that for almost free. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm kind of with you.
You're going to love this card.
Yeah, I would have given it a lower grade, but I think you've got me convinced. I think it'll fit in nicely. And boy, when you do win combat with it, like I attack my 3/3 into your 3/3, they're like, yeah, okay, let's trade. And you're like, actually, like your guy's dead and I get to draw an extra card off of this and it only costs me 1 mana. I can do something else this turn. Like that's kind of a blowout. Like the upside's actually really high. Yeah. All right, I'm in. Timely interference. Next is Battlewing Mystic. This is 1 and a blue for a 2/1 bird wizard at uncommon. It has flying and it has kicker of red. And when it enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, discard your hand and draw 2 cards.
Awesome card. 2 mana, 2/1 flying. I'm in. Also, It turns into a mole drifter if you can get empty-handed because it doesn't matter how many cards you discard. You always draw 2.
And it's only 3 mana, so you may be able to cast a spell even if that's fairly late in the game. That's great. Wow.
Battlewing Mystic looks like a B to me. Just a real solid card all around.
I like that. Yeah, give me that blue-red. Coral Colony is next. This is 1 and a blue for a 1/4 wall. It's uncommon. It has defender, as you might expect. And it has an activated ability of 1 and a blue and tap it. Target player mills X cards where X is the number of creatures you control with defender. Ouch.
So there's this wall theme. And you've got Coral Colony, you've got Blight Pile, you've got, as like wall payoffs, there's a white one as well. And then there's a bunch of random walls in the set. I think it actually works kind of nicely because there's things pressing for and against it. For it is it's good to set up your control decks with these walls that naturally defend you and then close out the game. You're milling your opponent for 3 a turn or whatever. It's bad because enlist punishes high toughness creatures. You've got your 2/2 with enlist, attacks as a 4/2. Coral Colony can't block it. I don't think you're going to be that excited to play Coral Colony outside of the wall deck, but in the wall deck, I think it does some pretty good work. And a 2 mana 1/4. It's not the worst 2-drop if you need to defend yourself somehow.
I am a huge sucker for a wall deck, like Vent Sentinel all day.
This is the Vent Sentinel's Blight Pile, but this is still similar.
Yeah. So what do you want to give it? It seems build around, right?
It's like a build around C+, where
okay.
I think Blight Pile is the actual wall you're building around. And if you end up in a spot where you can play... you play Coral Colony to supplement your wall count, then that's totally fine too.
Okay. Yeah, I like build around for it.
Yeah, that's kind of where I would leave it.
Essence Scatter is in this set. It's 1 and a blue for an instant.
Love it.
Common, and it counters a creature spell. These used to be lower on our list, but over the years they've moved up higher and higher, and I hold Essence Scatter in very high now.
Yeah. I mean, it's a fantastic card. Like if you're going to spend 2 mana to trade for something that costs more than 2, and two mana is the sort of thing where you end up getting a mana advantage often enough and not costing yourself that much. Whereas like leaving up a 3 mana counter is a completely different ball game. It sounds like a small difference.
Yeah.
Leaving up cancel, is like the Marshall No Face. Leaving up Essence Scatter is like, because you just don't get punished when you leave up 2 mana that much.
Yeah, that's right. And remember, we're playing limited. Like it's not like you can run into decks that don't run creatures. Like that's just not a thing in limited. So, Essence Scatter will have targets, and it will have good targets, and they will almost all cost more than Essence Scatter costs you. It also gives you a reasonable thing to do on turn 2. If this is all you have, you can counter your opponent's 2 or 3 drop, and that's excellent too. So I really like Essence Scatter. I mean, I think it's like a stone cold playable, and I'd give it a C+. So that's usually where it ends up landing for me these days.
I think it's C+, but it might be close to B level in terms of you do need this to end up winning games. This will help you win some of those games.
It is a key piece for sure. Founding the Third Path is our first saga, which I absolutely love. It's 1 and a blue for an uncommon saga, and it has read ahead. And I'm going to read what this does. There's other ones here too, but read ahead is choose a chapter and start with that many lore counters. Add one after your draw step, skip chapters, don't trigger, and sacrifice it after chapter 3. So basically these sagas allow you to start wherever you want. Normally it's like, oh, I'm on chapter 1, and then you have to go through the story, but here you can pick where you want to start, and then it'll continue to the end there. So if you start on chapter 1, it says you may cast an instant or sorcery spell with mana value 1 or 2 from your hand without paying its mana cost. So that's obviously if you have one in your hand or not is the question there. Chapter 2 is target player mills 4 cards. And chapter 3 is exile target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard, copy it, you may cast the copy. So, there's going to be, if you want to play this card, there'll be a decent amount of starting on chapter 2, milling yourself for 4, and then trying to find an instant or sorcery from there.
Yeah, and once again, chapter 3, it's not for free. You can cast the copy. So
yeah,
if you have a deck
bad, right?
I think it is generally bad because look, here's the best case scenario. You pay it for 2 mana, and you play a 2-drop sorcery out of your hand, right? So you got mana neutral. You mill yourself for 4, and then third chapter, you get to cash this in to play a spell out of your graveyard, maybe that you milled or maybe the original spell you played.
Right.
So you spent 2 mana, you got back 2 mana, and then you get to cast one of your spells later. So you're kind of up in that exchange, right? Because you basically had a 0 mana spell that gave you some card selection, especially with the mill. But that's the best case scenario where you immediately had a spell to play and you milled something that you want to play. Because sometimes the card in your graveyard is like a removal spell and they don't have something good in play.
Right. And there's a horrible downside scenario where basically you get none of it. Like, you don't have the card in your hand. You go chapter 2, you just don't hit. And then it just fizzles away and that's it. So I don't like Founding the Third Path. I love sagas. Read ahead's kind of cool, but this card's bad to me.
Yeah. Founding the Third Path looks like a D to me. I could see some decks that maybe will try to run this, but I think for the most part you should avoid it.
I'm more of a Fourth Path kind of guy. So we'll skip this one. Haunting Figment is next. This is 1 and a blue for a 2/1 illusion. It's common, and it's got vigilance somehow, and it can't be blocked as long as you've cast an instant or sorcery spell this turn. It says some bad dreams stay with you forever. And to me, this card seems like kind of a bad dream.
Imagine you have a blue-red deck that has a lot of spells in it. You get to play this as your 2-drop, and then whenever you cast a spell, it just gets free 2 damage. It doesn't sound terrible to me.
I just don't like the comment. I don't like 2/1s with vigilance. Like that doesn't work. Like that. What the vigilance is so that you can block, but that doesn't change anything if you've got a 2/1. Like it's either going to trade or not.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe it's good in the blue-red deck, maybe because we were talking about piling on damage and this could be a really annoying source of damage. I just don't like how it is on defense, and I don't really understand the vigilance part as a result, but
the vigilance part isn't particularly good.
Right. It's just weird too.
It is a weird card overall, but I think that you'll play this in your blue-red decks fairly often. So
you're in the C range for it. I was going to give it a D, but
yeah, I think it's like a C.
Okay. I'm going to go D on it. We'll see. Impede Momentum is next. It's 1 and a blue for a sorcery. It's common, and it says tap target creature and put 3 stun counters on it. And then it says if a permanent with a stun counter on it would become untapped, remove 1 from it instead. And then it also has scry 1.
I'm not a big fan of this one. I think that
3 stun counters? Doesn't that just knock it out forever?
You play it, it doesn't untap, you do something else, doesn't untap, you do something that doesn't untap, and then it finally untaps. That's okay, but I don't know that I'm really that interested in spending a card on this. I mean, you of all people, I think you're down a card at the end. It's kind of like a bounce spell.
Yeah. Well, two things. One, I love bounce spells, but two, I think that any time that I feel that my deck can apply pressure, right, that I can actually like close out a game or that I have a board state of any sort, this feels like a removal spell to me. I mean, that's just forever before the card actually gets to do things again.
I think you need to be fairly assertive before you
right.
want this.
If I'm a control deck, then it feels terrible. But if I'm like blue-red and I can like smash my opponent and actually get in for damage, this feels like, the type of card that looks like a temporary effect, but ends up being permanent because the game ends while the creature's still tapped. So I would look to play this in aggressive blue decks. I don't know how many of those there are, but blue-red seem to be
blue-red and blue-white are the two decks that I think are going to be best suited to use this. I don't think blue-green ramp kicker is going to want it that much, and exactly. I certainly don't think blue-black control. Like that's the opposite way. Look, right. I think the card is strong if you use it responsibly.
Okay, I like that. Yeah,
so
I like that too. These ones are hard to give a grade because it really does depend on which deck. But I would give it a C, for the decks that it goes well in, and I would give it a D or a D- for the decks that it doesn't.
I would give it probably a C- / almost build around where you just have to be tempo oriented before impede momentum is the kind of card you want in your deck.
Impulse, the OG, 1 and a blue for an instant at common. Look at the top 4 cards of your library, put one of them in your hand and the rest on the bottom in any order.
So
is this card good and limited?
Yeah. It's not bad. It's the kind of card that you don't end up running that often because it sits on the sidelines because, you put all your good creatures in, you put all your good removal in, how many slots do you have left?
Right.
What Impulse does kind of nicely, it does two things. One is in a deck that cares about casting spells, it does a good job of, giving you spells to cast. The other thing that I think it does nicely is it just, if you don't have 2-drops, it gives you a pretty good reason to play it or a pretty good thing to play on turn 2. And I like that. I think that's pretty strong.
Yeah, I always view these type of cards as being the kind of card that you have to put in your deck when your deck pays you off for casting spells and otherwise fits that description that you said earlier. So in a strange way, I have Impulse almost in the build around camp. Not that you're building around it, but that it only goes in decks that really care because you just do run out of spots. It's just a fact that you can't just put Impulse in every deck you play.
Yeah, I think that you're going to play it in your blue-red decks fairly often. Mm-hmm. Sometimes in your blue-white decks, I think a little less often. I think the blue-white decks are going to have a few more creatures. Mm-hmm. And then if you have like it's not really what blue-green wants because they're all about like paying these kicker costs and getting value out of their creatures. But you could put it in your blue-green deck if you're short on 2-drops because, again, it'll make it so you hit your 3rd land drop more often. It'll make it so you cast a good spell on 3 more often, and those things are good.
Yeah.
So
it's just weird because, there's nothing wrong with Impulse. It's a totally good card, right? It's instant speed. It gets you selection. It gets you the card back. You're down a little bit of tempo. But, we've just learned that actually is a bigger cost than you'd seem. So you kind of need something else to pay you off for it. And that's what I would take into my decision point on whether I'm going to play Impulse is, am I getting paid off for playing this in other ways than just the face value of the card? And if I am, then I'm okay to play an Impulse. And if I'm not, it probably isn't making the cut.
Yeah.
What about Joint Exploration?
This is 1 and a blue. It's an instant uncommon. It's got a kicker of a green. Scry 2, then draw a card. And if it's kicked, you can put a land from your hand onto the battlefield.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah, this card's great. Look, it's a kind of mini Anticipate, right? You spend 2 mana, or it's a Preordain, actually, exactly. So it's an instant speed Preordain. And then if you end up having green mana, then it can ramp you. So yeah. Pretty nice in blue-green, kind of what you want to do. And again, the blue-red decks will still just play this because they're in for cantrips that'll trigger their stuff,
Right, exactly. Yeah, I like it. This actually looks like a B to me. Maybe a B- for Joint Exploration.
I think it's more like a B-, C+. Okay.
Yeah, it's doing enough, for these type of decks. Just take
every grade you're going to give a blue-green card and just dial it back a little bit.
Yeah, we have learned over the years, haven't we? Negate is next. It's 1 and a blue for an instant. It's common and it counters a non-creature spell. Much different story here than Essence Scatter.
Yeah, this is always a great sideboard card in draft. Generally a great main deck card in sealed. Not a card I would main deck in draft for the most part.
That's it. So sideboard grade for Negate. Protect the Negotiators is next. 1 and a blue for an instant. It's uncommon. It has a kicker of white. And if this spell was kicked, you get a 1/1 white soldier creature token, and you counter target spell unless its controller pays 1 for each creature you control.
It's a pretty neat little card. So for 2 mana, you get to counter, if counter something unless they pay like 1 or 2 mana because you have something in play. And then a little bit later in the game, you get to actually start to put some creatures into play, so it's harder for them to pay.
Right. Because and people need to remember that, these type of cards, they happen all at once, but they happen in order that the card says. Yeah. So, in this case, it says if it was kicked, you get the soldier, and then it says counter target spell. So that soldier does count towards that number.
It's a little tricky where I wouldn't play this card unless I had white mana in my deck. I think this is effectively a gold card. I do think it's pretty reasonable once you're in that spot, though.
Yeah, I think so too. Also, those type of decks, the blue-white decks, tend to have a board state that if you can protect it for an extra turn or two will win the game. Lots of flyers, evasion, that type of thing. So this could be really big for that. Do you need a spell to target in order to put this on the stack? Yes, right?
Yes, you do.
So
you can't just play it as a
make a 1/1. Okay. What do you want to give Protect the Negotiators?
I'll give it a C.
Yeah.
It's not a outstanding card, but it'll do some work.
See if you can kick it. Volsci Tide Turner is 1 and a blue for a 1/3 Merfolk Wizard. A common. It has tap, add blue. Spend this mana only to cast an instant or sorcery spell or a kicked spell.
So this is Bodalian Arcanist, but now it also pays for kickers.
And it makes blue.
And it makes blue, which is nice. I'm not super high on this. I think in the rare occasions that you want this card where you have like 10 cards it helps pay for, you'll be able to get them. No one else is going to want them. I think the Tide Turner gets a D from me.
I think it does too. And the fact that it only adds the color that you already have, I think hurts it for like the blue-green deck, for example, where you probably want access to like one-off different colors of mana to kick spells. Academy Wall is next. This is 2 and a blue for a 0/5 wall at common with Defender. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, you may draw a card. If you do, discard a card. This ability triggers only once each turn. Cool.
I like this card. I mean, it gives you loot for free when you cast spells. So you're not always going to be able to trigger it that easily because you have to cast a spell, but you're not paying mana. And an 0/5 will defend you a decent amount. Again, Enlist makes that a little harder, but I like Academy Wall. I would give it a C-. I think you'll play it in your spells decks.
It's an excited C-. Next is Airtie's Scorn. This is 1 blue for an instant. It's uncommon. It says this spell costs blue less to cast if an opponent casts 2 or more spells this turn, and it's a hard counter. It just counters target spell.
Not into it. It's just a cancel. They're not going to play multiple spells very often, and it's not like you can hold on to this to try to save it for that or whatever. It's a D. If you want a counter spell, it's fine, but not exciting. A
little better and sealed. Phyrexian Espionage is next. This is 2 and a blue for a sorcery. It's common. It has a kicker of 1 and a black, and it says draw 2 cards. If this spell was kicked, each opponent discards a card. Oh, that's nice.
It's divination that you can staple a little Ravenous Rats effect to.
I like it.
It's just cute, yeah. You know what? As my heart hurts, but this is still limited in 2022. You can't spend 5 mana on this and have it not affect the board like
even
all the
if
time.
It's a 3 for 1, Luis.
Like, look, sometimes you're going to put this card in your blue-black deck. You're going to be all right with it, especially since divination is fine.
Yeah,
but yeah, this is not.
You better want a divination, like.
Yes, that is. I think that's a good way to put it. So I think it's fine, but it's not exciting. It's a C-.
It's C- or a D+, being realistic. Yeah. Soaring Drake. Oh boy, this is a big moment, Luis. Power creep officially stamped into the common.
Sorry, Windrake.
2 and a blue flying slot. It is 2 and a blue for a 2/3 flyer. Windrake. This is strictly better. Wow, we have surpassed Windrake as the standard.
Yeah, and that is.
And how good is a 2/3 flyer for 3? It's fine.
Yeah, it's certainly worth playing.
C-.
I would give it a C+. Actually, I think it's just burly enough. That extra point of toughness really goes a long way.
Okay, yeah, I've just found that French vanilla creatures have a hard time keeping up in powerful formats like this one looks. Next is Tolarian Geyser. This is 2 and a blue for a sorcery. It's common. It says, and it has kicker of white. Return target creature to its owner's hand. Draw a card. If this spell was kicked, you gain 3 life. Wow.
Love it.
Wow, 4 mana, bounce something at sorcery speed. Bounce something, draw a card, gain 3 life?
I mean, you'll play this even if you can't kick it ever.
Yeah,
it's
every
still a
single
sorcery
time.
speed repulse. And of course, if you can kick it, it's a nice extra life total there. So yeah, I'm big into Tolaria and Geyser. I mean, blue-red decks are going to snap this up. Blue-white decks are going to be happy. And every now and then you're going to play one of like a Shimmering Grotto and just pay the kicker, because that works out nicely too.
Yeah, this type of card is borderline free, right? Like when you pay this mana, get the card back and reset your opponent's creature or kill a token or whatever, like there's almost no downside to it. If the creature costs 3 or more, then you're either equal or better. Even if it's cheaper, you're not that much off and you're getting the card back.
Totally.
Wow.
B minus for Tolaria and Geyser?
Yeah, B minus for Tolaria and Geyser. What about Voda Sea Scavenger?
So it's 2 and a blue for a 3/2 Merfolk Rogue at common. It's got domain, and when it enters the battlefield, look at the top X cards of your library, X number of land types. You can put 1 on top and the rest on the bottom. So not that exciting overall, because you don't draw the card. It just is basically a little bit of card selection, a bit of scrying, you could say. So yeah, this looks pretty mediocre. This is basically a 3/2 for 3 with minor upside. And sure, sometimes you'll look at the top 3 and get to put 1 on top, but that's not even that exciting. So I would give Voda Sea Scavenger a C minus.
I would just go D on it.
Sure.
Probably not going to make the cut that often. Micromancer is 3 and a blue for a 3/3 human wizard at uncommon. When it enters the battlefield, you may search your library for an instant or sorcery card with mana value 1, reveal it, put it in your hand, and then shuffle. Well, this is an easy one to figure out.
It's great if you have a target, and it's obviously not great if you don't. I mean, it's mediocre. I would play this with as few as 1 target, though.
I think so, too. The upside's really strong.
And if you have 2 targets, that's fantastic. And there's a bunch of good 1-mana cards. I think it's worth taking this card fairly early and just speculating on, there's just a lot of 1-mana instants and sorceries running around.
Yeah, and they're extra good because of kicker, right? Like we talked about Rona's Vortex earlier, Timely Interference. These cards look like a 1-drop, but really they have, 2 or even 3 mana tacked on and give you a comparable effect. So, Micromancer is not just getting small effect cards. It's getting cards that, you can actually get 5 mana value out of. And that's excellent. So yeah, I give it a build around B. You don't need much. Very low
build
threshold.
Around is have 1 target.
Have a target for it. If you don't, though, it really is just a hill giant, and that's not really up to snuff. Talus Lookout is 2 blue for a 3/2 human pirate. At common, it's got flying, and when it dies, look at the top 2 cards of your library, put 1 of them into your hand and the other into your graveyard. Woo! That's a nice common right there.
I mean, people are going to argue ad nauseum about this versus Organ Hoarder. Mm-hmm. Obviously, getting the card right away is a pretty big deal, but this card's still really good. It's a 3/2 flyer. It's a much more relevant body in play. I mean, obviously, the Talus Lookout is just fantastic.
Yes.
I would give it a B, and
Same.
I think it's not that far from a B plus, to be honest.
Yes.
A 3/2 flyer, they can't ignore it, and it draws you, not only draws you a card, but draws you the best of your top 2 cards, and it puts 1 in the graveyard, which is nice for a lot of these decks too.
Totally. Wow. Talus Lookout really pushed common. It gets a B, which is a rarity. Tidepool Turtle is 3 and a blue for a 2/5 turtle at common. It has the activated ability 2 and a blue to scry 1. That just sounds too expensive to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea is you stall the game out with your 2/5 and you start scrying. That's not really how it's going to play out. Tidepool Turtle gets a D.
I think so,
pick
too.
them up if you want them.
I love cards like that, but 3 mana activated abilities are really expensive. Frost Fist Strider is next. It's 3 blue for a 4/4 elemental giant at uncommon. It has Ward 2, so it's already annoying. And when it enters the battlefield, tap target creature an opponent controls and put a stun counter on it. And again, that keeps it untapped. It keeps it tapped, for a turn cycle. That's
fantastic
excellent.
card.
That's
I mean,
great.
this is the fact that it has Ward 2 makes it, pretty annoying for the opponent to deal with. It locks something down. It's quite large. So
yep.
Yeah, I mean, you can't really.
I like
can't
B
really
for
go
Frost
wrong.
Fist Strider. What do you think, B?
I like B plus. I think that this card is just going to have a huge impact on the board.
Yes.
And the ward 2 is going to make it pretty hard for the opponent to really interact with it. So
yes.
Yeah.
Excellent card. Djinn of the Fountain is 4 blue for a 4/4 creature. Djinn, it is uncommon. It has flying. And it says, whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, choose one. You can have Djinn of the Fountain get +1/+1 until end of turn, or exile Djinn of the Fountain, return it to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step, or scry one.
It's okay.
That seems fine.
It's a 6-mana 4/4 flyer, which isn't, obviously the most exciting. But if you untap with it, it gives you some options. My guess is this is going to be kind of one of your last cards added in a lot of these decks. And you do want some mana spells before you end up playing this card.
Yeah, it's not great. I mean, the middle ability of protecting itself doesn't really matter because you're going to cast this on 6th, and if they have removal, they're just going to kill it. So that's probably not going to come up much. My guess is that you're going to use +1/+1 ability if it's going to kill the opponent, and if it's not, then you're going to be scrying a lot because you're late in the game and lands are pretty useless at that point. But yeah, it looks like a D+ to me. Like Djinn of the Fountain just feels a little expensive, a little clunky, a little bit of a setup cost, and doesn't come together to be something super powerful.
Yeah, I agree.
Tolarian Terror is 6 and a blue for a 5/5 serpent at common. It costs 1 less to cast for each instant and sorcery in your graveyard, and it has ward 2.
I love this card.
Turbo Serpent?
I mean, you're just going to play this card for not very much mana some of the time. You're going to play it for 2-3 mana. And even if you play it for 4 mana, in the middle of the game, that's still a really good deal.
It is. Yeah. And, this is where we were talking about cards like Impulse, right? Where you're like, well, I need an excuse to play those type of cards. Well, there you go, right? Like if you have a couple of Tolarian Terrors, now Impulse goes up in value in your deck because you're just putting this card into your yard.
Yeah, I like Tolarian Terror at like B+ build around, where if your blue-red deck has tons of cheap cantrips and impulses and all that stuff, and you have 2 of these, you're going to feel like your deck is awesome.
Yeah. That's a really sweet comment. It does require build around, as you said.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's blue. That'll move us over to black. And our first card is Battlefly Swarm. It is black for a 1/1 Phyrexian insect at common. It's got flying, and you can pay black to have it get Death Touch until end of turn. We always pay extra attention to these 1-drops now. Does this one meet that threshold?
I think it does, because the way I think this plays out is you play this early and you just peck over for a couple damage, right? Because you're not blocking in the early game, and your opponent isn't going to be able to block as well. And then later in the game, you can leave up mana if you want. And yes, that is kind of costly, but you end up in a spot where if you want to leave up the mana, you can, and it's not a huge cost to you. And overall, you got a couple extra damages, and it can block a flyer. Like they have a big flyer, it does handle it. So all that stuff added together, I feel like is enough to make this card pretty decent. It's not great, but it's all right.
A good defensive C.
Yeah, I think a defensive C is about right. Like at the end of the day, it's going to trade for a card, and the 1 mana is not so costly that you can't afford to do that.
Yeah. Bone Splinters is back. This is a black for a sorcery at common. As an additional cost to cast this spell, you sacrifice a creature, but it does just destroy target creature.
Yeah, it doesn't kill any planeswalkers. That you can't discard a card to cast any of that stuff.
Yeah, this is old school, Avacyn Restored style. So you do need to have fodder for this, but the tempo that you can gain from it is really strong, and it is unconditional. It just kills any creature. So, this is a good way to get around ward, right? Because you're only paying the 1 mana, but the additional cost is very, very real. It limits how many Bone Splinters you're going to want to play in a deck, even one that supports this type of thing. And you do need expendable creatures. You can't cast a 4-mana creature and just sacrifice it to Bone Splinters to kill their 5-drop. Like that's not going to work. You're going to lose that game more often than not. So you need expendable fodder. Think red, black, the cards that we saw already at gold that will pump out expendable creatures or things that you can bring back from the graveyard or temporary creatures or tokens or whatever. If you have those though, the first Bone Splinters is good. Like you'll want to run it. The second one starts to fall off pretty quickly, and the third one's usually not playable kind of regardless.
I think a good way to look at it is if you have 3 or 4 cards, whether they be creatures or token makers or whatever, that you'd be happy to sack to Bone Splinters, the card's good.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's just not that good. Like if you put this in your black-green deck and you don't have ways to make tokens and most of your creatures are real, it's just not a good card.
Yeah.
But you put in your white-black tokens deck or your red-black deck that has like a threaten, like you're talking about a very different experience.
That's right. I give Bone Splinters a C, just sort of on average, but just remember they go down steeply after the first, and you do need to support them. If that's the case, you'll get C plus, performance out of Bone Splinters. What does Cult Conscript do?
This is black for a 2/1. It's uncommon, Skeleton Warrior. Enters the battlefield tapped, and you can pay 1 and a black and return it from your graveyard to the battlefield, but only if a non-skeleton creature died under your control this turn.
Okay.
So this card basically is 1 mana 2/1, which is kind of nice. I really like that it enters the battlefield tap instead of being unable to block, because that's sometimes, it does one of the two is generally the case. This is like the 10th version of this card they've made. But you play this and then you don't block the first turn, but then you just kind of leave it back if you're not attacking, and your opponent's not really going to want to attack into this. And then when something else dies, this just comes back.
And, we were talking about Bone Splinters and things to sacrifice. This combos with those really nicely. The flavor text is great. It says his eternal rest turned out to be more of a quick nap. That's pretty good. I like Cult Conscript. I think it'll fit into these decks pretty well, and it's a relevant 1-drop as well, which I always value highly. This looks actually in the B range for me, because I don't think the skeleton thing, I think most creatures aren't skeletons. So mostly it'll say whenever
a creature dies
under your control.
Yeah, I like B for Cult Conscript. Look, it's going to be the card when your opponent plays it on turn 1, you're going to groan, because it's like, I'm going to take 6 damage off that and then have to trade with it, or maybe I'll take 6-8 damage and then eventually I'll play something that can block it, but that's still really annoying.
Yeah, it is. Okay, B for Cult Conscript. Next is Cut Down. This is black for an instant and uncommon. Destroy target creature with total power and toughness 5 or less.
You know what? You're playing Magic. You opted into doing some math, and in this case, you gotta add those 2 numbers.
Right. So it kills 2 2s, 2 3s, 3 2s,
1 4s, 0 5s.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's good. Think about it like a shock. It's a shock that can't team up on a bigger creature, because shock, at least your 2/2 plus a shock can kill a 4/4. Right. This doesn't ever do that, but it's a 1 mana and removal spell that kills pretty much anything they'll play in the first 3 turns of the game. And then at some point we'll have a target later. So that looks like a B- to me.
Me too.
You're going to be happy with this card in your deck.
It's so cheap, right? I mean, it's 1 mana instant that can kill all that stuff. Yeah. I'm in for that. I like B for it. Urborg Repossession is next. It's black for a sorcery. It's common. And it has a kicker of 1 and a black. Return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. You gain 2 life. If the spell was kicked, return another target permanent card from your graveyard to your hand. Whoa, baby. There's your late game engine.
I like Urborg Repossession. It's, first of all, 1 mana to get a creature back and gain 2 life is not terrible.
Yeah.
And then 3 mana to get 2 creatures back.
Right.
Or if you want another permanent, so you have, probably not going to get a land back all that often, but you could get back, like they blew up one of your enchantments or something like that.
Saga.
Yeah. All that works really nicely. So I think that the diminished returns hit really hard on these cards. The first one is great. I think it's like around a C+ level for if you can kick it.
Yeah.
The second one is much less important, because you just don't want to draw 2 of these in the early game.
That's right. Boy, but even if you just pay the 1 mana to get a thing back, gain 2 life, you could cast that thing that you got back, because this is so cheap if you're not kicking. So that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like C+ for Urborg Repossession.
Same.
Solid playable. Battle Rage Blessing is 1 and a black for an instant at common. Target creature gains Death Touch and Indestructible until end of turn. This isn't really the kind of removal that we like, is it?
No. This is not really where you want to be. I think that you would rather not play Battle Rage Blessing unless you have to. And it's a good sideboard against good, like, big green creatures, but I think Battle Rage Blessing is a D.
Me too. Blight Pile. Here's your card. What does it do?
This is 1 and a black for a 3/3 defender at uncommon, and you can pay 2 and a black and tap it, and each opponent loses X life, where X is the number of creatures with defender you control.
Wow. So do you want to mill him or do you want to kill him? Blight Pile says kill him.
Yeah, I think Blight Pile's great.
I do too.
Like, 2 mana 3/3 is a great defender early, and then you just have, even with 2 creatures with a defender out, this just drains them really fast. And if you have like 3, then just forget about it.
Then it's over. Yeah. And also, we talk a lot about defensive speed, right, with the control decks, and Blight Pile's a great little way to get on the board and make it so that if your opponent's trying to attack you on the ground and you're willing to trade off your Blight Pile, they're going to have a very difficult time getting through that without spending a card.
Yeah.
I like it.
I think
that's great.
I think it's pretty sweet.
Yeah, I would say C+ just straight up, or maybe C straight up, but then build around, it's like B- B range.
I think it's just like a B.
Yeah, because you can put this in a deck with no other defenders and still have it do things, as long as you're like blue-black, something that wants to slow down the game and
right.
And
if you're not trying to attack them, Blight Pile is going to be a great addition. Your blue-black control deck's just going to play it on its lonesome, and you probably still got an Academy Wall in there somewhere, or Coral Reef. So I think overall, I would give Blight Pile a B. I think it's a card you're gonna prioritize taking.
Love that. Next is Knight of Dusk's Shadow. This is 1 and a black for a 2/2 human knight at uncommon. It has menace. Your opponents can't gain life, and it has the activated ability 1 and a black, Knight of Dusk's Shadow gets +1/+1 until end of turn. We should send this to Randy Bueller.
Yeah.
These things have come a long way since he won PT with this type of card.
Pump Knights.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
This is good. I mean, a 2-mana 2/2 menace I would already be in for. And then the fact that you can pump it means even when they finally double block it, you probably just trade for 2 creatures.
Yeah. And they can't gain life will be situationally annoying, but isn't a huge deal.
No, that part's, whatever.
Yeah.
It's a B straight up without that text, and that text every now and then will be relevant.
Yeah, I like B for Knight of Dusk's Shadow. That is great. Next is Phyrexian Vivisector. This is 1 and a black for a 2/2 Phyrexian human at common, and whenever a creature you control dies, scry 1.
This is fine.
Fine.
If you need a 2/2 and you have a lot of creatures in your deck that you expect to die, I mean, it can give you a little bit of action late game, but for the most part, I think you're not going to be excited to play Phyrexian Vivisector.
Yeah, I would give it a D+. I think it'll make the cut sometimes, but there's going to be a lot of decks that just don't care about it. It's too close to vanilla. Pilfer is 1 and a black for a sorcery at uncommon, and it says target opponent reveals their hand. You choose a non-land card from it. That player discards that card. Keeping it simple.
Yeah, I mean, one of the risks with discard is that it becomes dead late. This gets around that a little bit by just hitting anything, not lands, but anything else. Mm-hmm. If you don't have a play on turn 2, this is a good play on turn 2. I don't mind it.
Yeah, I don't mind it either. These cards don't usually excel. Like, this isn't the type of thing that you're excited to open or where you're like, oh my God, I got a Pilfer, I'm good to go. But I think you could put this in your deck and be fine.
Yeah, I would say it's a C.
C. Splatter Goblin is 1 and a black for a 2/1 Phyrexian Goblin. This is also common. And when it dies, target creature an opponent controls gets -1/-1 until end of turn. That's nice.
Great. Yeah, early game, it'll trade for anything.
Yeah.
If they find themselves in a spot where they have some 1-toughness creatures in play, it actually kind of puts them under the question there. It's a little harder for them to trade off with this in play. And then it can also combine its ability to take down an X3 if it needs to. So
yeah.
I like C for Splatter Goblin. You're happy with this card in your deck.
I think it looks like a solid C. Toxic Abomination is next. I feel like I've seen this card before. 1 and a black for a 3/2 Phyrexian Zombie at common. And when it enters a battlefield, you lose 2 life. So you're paying the price here for the 3/2 for 2.
Yeah, I'm not really into this. Like, there's just going to be a lot of games where this card's really bad for you.
Totally. Like, the problem with 3/2s, right, is that they trade off for 2/2s. And a lot of times the people's 2-mana play is just a something 2/2 that they don't really care about that much. And you're going to pay the same amount, except for you have to lose 2 life to just make that trade anyway. Right. So I don't like Toxic Abomination. Also, like, I can't imagine playing this in some of the color pairs. Blue-black, black-green doesn't really seem to want cards like this. I guess it's a red-black deck primarily. Maybe. Yeah. So I like a D for Toxic Abomination. Not where I want to be.
Tribute to Urborg, on the other hand, this is 1 and a black. It's an instant at common. It's got kicker of 1 and a blue. So it baseline gives a creature -2/-2 until end of turn. Ooh. And if you kick it, that creature gets an additional -1/-1 until end of turn for each instant and sorcery in your graveyard. So basically, It's 2 mana instant -2/-2, or 4 mana instant like -4, -4, -5, -5. A great way to kind of split those out where I'm going to play this if I can't kick it, if I need removal, and it's pretty solid in blue-black decks where it'll do the thing you want early, kill their 2-drop, but then on the late game, this can give -6/-6 and kill their 6-drop as well.
It doesn't count itself in this equation, right?
It does not, no.
Okay. Yeah, I like cards like this a lot. And you mentioned it earlier with the shock thing, but this is an even better version, right? Where, your 3/3 can trade for their 5/5 or eat their 4/4 in conjunction with Tribute to Urborg. So that's really good. I assume this will be in the B range if you can kick it. Scales well with the game. So maybe like a B for Tribute?
I would give it a B-. I think it's okay. I think it's going to be pretty good. I mean, and this is if you can kick it. If you can't kick it, it's like a C.
Yeah. Next is Aggressive Sabotage. This is 2 and a black for a sorcery at common. It's got kicker of red. Target player discards 2 cards. If this spell was kicked, it deals 3 damage to that player.
Yeah, I mean, this is Mind Rot that also just whacks them in the face. So
it is a kick in the face. It's got
some upside.
Yeah. What did Blightning do?
Same thing, except it costs the red, black 1.
Yeah. Blightning was a heck of a card. I don't know. I'm actually a little torn on this because these Mind Rot effects generally aren't where you want to be, but there is something really compelling about adding the 3 damage to it when you can and just getting kind of all of those things together. That is a lot that you're throwing at your opponent.
Yeah, I mean...
It's demoralizing too, by the way, to get hit by these cards.
Yeah, I think that it's going to be about as good as a Mind Rot's going to be. Okay. And sometimes you'll want Mind Rot in your deck.
Yeah. D-ish. Sometimes not type card. What about Balduvian Atrocity?
This is 2 and a black for a 2/3 Phyrexian Berserker at uncommon. It's got kicker of 1 red mana. It has Menace. So it's 3 mana, 2/3 Menace. And if you pay the kicker, you can return a creature card from your graveyard with mana value 3 or less onto the battlefield with haste, and then it sacks end of turn.
Okay, so in ETBs, you get a small creature back, and you get to attack with that too. That's good. Remember, we've been talking, things way to combo with Bone Splinters or whatever. Like this could be that,
Yeah, it combos with Bone Splinters. It also gets like an ETB card. Like imagine getting a Phyrexian Rager out of your graveyard.
Yeah.
I think that's some real money. And also a 3 mana, 2/3 Menace is a fine fail case if you just have in your opening hand played on turn 3.
Card's great.
I like C+ for Balduvian Atrocity. Yeah. In the right deck, it can overperform.
Yeah, I like C+ trending towards B- for Balduvian Atrocity. That's strong. Braids' final frightful return, is a saga for 2 and a black. It's uncommon. And again, it has read ahead. So chapter 1 is you may sacrifice a creature. If you do, each opponent discards a card. Chapter 2 is return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. And chapter 3 is target opponent may sacrifice a non-land, non-token permanent. If they don't, they lose 2 life and you draw a card.
This does a lot of moving resources around at minimal value. So
yeah,
you probably don't want to sack a creature to make them discard unless you have a token out. And then you get a creature back on the second step, which is okay.
Yeah.
And then on the third step, you get to draw a card and they lose 2 life probably.
Or they sacrifice their worst non-token, non-land permanent.
Yeah.
So you squeak over the line if everything goes right and you're up a card.
If everything goes right, you're up a card because you return a creature, and then the third mode gets a card one way or another.
Right. But it's very conditional. You're returning a creature card from your graveyard, so you're up a card, but it's specifically a creature that was in your graveyard, so you don't have a lot of choice there. And then the card that you're up is the worst one that they had that's a non-token, non-land, or a card off top of your library. I don't hate it, but I mean, this is no, value engine or anything like that.
No.
I would give it a D. It just feels like a lot. Like maybe just getting a card back from your yard is good enough and you can just sort of maybe draw a card or nab something and you're happy with that. But it is slow. I can't imagine doing chapter 1.
If you had a token in play, I guess it would be okay.
I guess it's fine, yeah. Something that's tapped down or under an enchantment or whatever. Yeah, I don't know. I'm just going to say D for Braids' frightful return, and somebody's going to have to just beat me with it.
I think a D is about right. It's a lot of mana, like, that's the thing. It's not a ton of mana spent. It's not like a ton of time because you can skip ahead if you want to skip the first chapter, but it doesn't do that much either.
It doesn't have that much impact. I
like D for this.
It's the worst version of a lot of things, but it is a lot of things. Choking Miasma is next. It's 1 black for a sorcery at uncommon. It's got Kicker of Green. If this spell was kicked, put a +1/+1 counter on a creature you control, and then all creatures get -2/-2 until end of turn.
I'm not a big fan of the sweeper that gives -2/-2, because what generally happens is it kills one of their creatures and 0 of yours, or maybe 2 of theirs and 1 of yours. It's really hard to kill 2 or 3 of theirs and none of yours.
Right.
Like, it happens sometimes, but it's just not that often.
Yeah.
The kicker's nice because it lets you save, one of your 2/2s, but I like D/sideboard for Choking Miasma. There are matchups where it'll be good, but I just look at a lot of games you play, and this card wouldn't do much in some of those games.
Yeah, I'm full on sideboard for Choking Miasma, especially on formats like this that are a little grindy or a little more expensive. It gets worse. Eerie Soul Tender is 2 and a black for a 3/1 Spirit Cleric at common. When it enters the battlefield, mill 3 cards. I like that. You can pay 4 and a black and exile it from your graveyard to return another target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. That's a little slow, but I kind of like the mill 3 when it ETBs. We've seen some good payoffs for this out of a couple of color pairs, primarily green-black.
Yeah, and if you can stock your graveyard and then trade off, and then later this does something. Plus, if you're that deck and you mill this, that also works too. This is the kind of card I think is probably like a C-, but it's possible that the format ends up being in a place where it's going to come down to you using these out of your graveyard, often enough that you makes this into a decent card.
See, that's what this is going to be my benchmark for the format. If I'm exiling these regularly, then I know I'm going to be kind of in a happy place. But remember the Maestro guy that was also a 3/1 with 5 mana, and we never did.
No, he didn't do anything.
No, he never had the time. Gibbering Barricade is next. This is great. 2 and a black for a 2/4 Nightmare Wall at common. It does have Defender, and you can pay 2 and a black and sacrifice a creature to gain 1 life and draw a card. This is sweet. That's a 2/4 for 3. Like, that's a lot of stats for 3.
I like that they're putting stats on the defenders now, since like you can make them a 2 mana 3/3 or a 3 mana 2/4. They can't attack. What's going to go wrong?
Right.
So
it's hard to make these too good also, right? It's like, oh, that format sucked. They made a wall that was too good. It's like,
right.
Yeah. Never said that before. This is cool. I kind of like this. This seems like a bread and butter piece for the wall deck, of course, too, to go with your blight piles and all that.
Also in like black, white or black, red, if you have tokens or sack stuff, 3 mana is like slightly on the pricey side, but 3 mana to sack a creature, gain a life, and draw a card is still going to be something that in the late game is going to do good work.
It's also annoying versus like if they have sorcery speed removal, you're like go, and then they want to kill your thing, and instead you get a card out of it. Like, it's really annoying for them. You can also sack itself just if you need to cash in.
Yeah, I like probably C+ for the Barricade.
Yeah, I do too, actually. This is a front runner for one of my favorite cards in the set. Next card is also that same thing. Phyrexian Rager. He's back. When was Phyrexian Rager first printed? Apocalypse. Wow, that is way old. 2 and a black, 2/2 Phyrexian Horror. It's common, and when it ETBs, you draw a card and you lose a life. This is a cube staple. Like,
okay, Phyrexian Rager has aged out of cube at this point. I will say that.
Out of vintage cube, yeah, for sure.
And even legacy cube. But
probably.
It's still a good card. 3 mana 2/2 draw card, you lose a life, but 3 mana 2/2 draw card right away, and it doesn't ask anything of you, just does it. Obviously, Phyrexian Rager is great. It's going to get a B-. We're never going to cut it, and we're going to take it early.
Yep, that's exactly it. Love that card. Shadow Prophecy. This is 2 and a black for an instant at common. It has Domain. Look at the top X cards of your library, where X is the number of basic land types you control. Put up to 2 of them into your hand and the rest into your graveyard. You lose 2 life.
I'm not super high on this. Like, first of all, you could just play it as like a draw 2, lose 2, and that's fine in a normal deck. And yes, if you domain it up, you get to look at like 3, 4, or 5 cards. You're still just drawing 2.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't think you're going to want this effect most of the time. There's enough ways to get card advantage that you don't need to lean on a card that only draws cards and loses you life. Compare this to Phyrexian Rager, right? So,
right, totally.
So I like D for Shadow Prophecy.
Yeah.
It's got some sideboard applications. There are matchups where boarding in some of these is going to do good work.
Definitely. And the price is right for it too. It's just like you said, there's other ways to generate card advantage, and you usually won't have to lean on cards that only do that. Extinguish the Light is next. It's 2 black for an instant. It's common. Destroy target creature or planeswalker. If its mana value was 3 or less, you gain 3 life. Well,
fantastic.
There's your bread and butter.
Kills anything, and then when you kill a small thing, you even gain 3. So a B for Extinguish the Light.
Definitely type of card that makes you want to play that color. Monstrous War Leech is 3 and a black for a Leech Horror. This is an uncommon with star for its power and toughness. It's got a kicker of blue, and it says, as Monstrous War Leech enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, mill 4 cards, and its power and toughness are each equal to the highest mana value among cards in your graveyard. So if you have a 5-drop in there, it's a 5/5?
Yep.
Okay.
So when you play this, let's say you can't kick it, you're probably going to end up with, like a 3/3 or something, but it does continuously update. So as things go into your graveyard, it gets bigger. And then, of course, if you can pay the kicker, it'll kind of help fuel itself a bit. Mm-hmm. You would need this to be a 4/4 reliably for you to be excited, and if sometimes it would be a 5/5 or a 6/6, that's fine too.
Yeah. I think I would be looking at the mill part as like kind of part of the fundamental reason why I have this in my deck.
Yeah, I can't really imagine playing it that often without the mill part, because the mill part not only helps you synergize with what this deck's presumably trying to do, but it also shores up the times when you draw this and nothing's gone to your graveyard. Like, you don't want to do that. Though, note that you need at least one thing in your graveyard when you play it, even with kickers, so it doesn't die right away.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I hate that. Yeah, I do like the idea of having a discard outlet or an instant speed mill, and then, attack you, and they're like, okay, it's a 3/3 right now, I guess I'll block, and then you can like mill your cards and see what you hit, or discard a 7-drop or something and do something silly. I'm going to say C- for Monstrous War Leech. I mean, it is a gold card effectively, and it is just a big dumb vanilla thing in its best form, and in its worst form, it literally dies upon entering the battlefield. So
yeah, that sounds right to me.
What about Phyrexian Warhorse?
This is 3 and a black for a 3/3 Phyrexian Horse at common. It's got a kicker of a white. And when it enters the battlefield, if it goes kicked, you get a 1/1 white soldier. You can also pay 1 and sacrifice another creature to give the Warhorse +2/+1 until end of turn.
So cheap sack outlet that lets you pump this thing up a ton. And
it only gets 1 point of toughness on each sacrifice, which is obviously not the most exciting.
It is a type of card that when they attack with it, though, you have to like count up how many creatures they have and see if it's not just a lethal attack, right? Like if they have 4 creatures and 4 mana, they're just like,
11,
I could
take
just
11 or whatever.
Right. And you got to be careful. That said, that doesn't usually play out that way. 5 mana for a 3/3 with a 1/1 with a reasonable activated ability on the Warhorse is a decent deal. Yeah, this looks like a C to me. I think this is like kind of right down the middle.
I think it's closer to a C-, but
if you can kick it, I was thinking, but yeah.
Yeah, I think it's closer to a C- even then.
Okay.
I think it's just okay. But, if you want to play it, you can play it.
Sheoldred's Restoration is 3 and a black for a sorcery at uncommon. It has a kicker of 2 and a white. Return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. If this spell was kicked, you gain life equal to that card's mana value. Otherwise, you lose that much life. Oh boy. And then you exile this card.
So I don't really like the Sheoldred's Restoration, because when you play it for 4 mana, you're just going to lose like 5 life or something.
Yeah.
That seems awful. And then when you play it for 7 mana, sure, it's fine, but still not really a good deal.
No, I don't like this.
That you cannot play it at profitable amounts until 7, really. So I would say this is an F. I just would avoid playing it.
I don't want to pay it for 7, period. And for 4, I'd rather just pay 1 mana and just get the thing back. Tattered Apparition is next. It's 3 and a black for a 2/2 Flying Shade at common. And you can pay 1 and a black to give it +1/+1 until end of turn. Just classic Shade action here.
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty bad blocker when it starts, which is the main reason I would not be that interested in playing this. Yeah, it can pump fairly large in the late game, but I think that Tattered Apparition is pretty bad. I would give it a D.
I would too. I don't think that this is the type of card. Like 2 mana to pump +1/+1 is a big investment. You have to be kind of all in on that. Sengir Connoisseur is next. This is 3 black for a 3/3 vampire at uncommon. It's got flying. And whenever 1 or more other creatures die, put a +1/+1 counter on Sengir Connoisseur. This ability triggers only once each turn. Okay.
So it's nice that it looks at both sides of the board.
Mm-hmm.
So, this is going to get some value coming or going. It is capped, though. The fact that it's capped means that this isn't going to be like a 9/9 after 2 turns.
No. Most it can pick up is the 1 counter per turn, right? So, man, I just wonder if Sengir Vampire effect type cards have, they never were really that powerful. It was kind of an iconic card from the past, but I mean, I don't know. I'm not that excited about Sengir Connoisseur. Like, that takes a lot of effort to get going, and I really need it to be a 5/5 before I'm like, sweet, I'm really doing it. 4/4, I feel like I'm kind of even money on the transaction, and when it comes down as a 3/3, I feel like I'm a little behind.
Yeah, you don't end up feeling like you're getting away with something till at least 2 turns after this,
right?
And then it starts out vulnerable to lightning strike, right, or a similar effect. So I would say Sengir Connoisseur is a C. Like, look, when your opponent plays this, you are going to sit up in your chair a little and be like, okay, I gotta get rid of that.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
It does get bigger whenever things happen, whenever creatures interact. So it's not like you can just ignore it, but it is also the kind of card you pay 5 mana for. Also with the good bounce spell, the bounce spell draw card. Yeah.
I'm down on this. I'm going to go D+ for Sengir Connoisseur.
All right.
I know that's a little aggressive because it is still like a potentially big flyer, but I don't like it that much.
All right. That's fair.
Writhing Necromass. Here's your 7-drop, by the way, for the War Leech. 6 and a black for a 5/5 zombie giant at common, and it costs 1 less to cast for each creature card in your graveyard, and it has Death Touch.
I love this card. I just don't think it's hard to play this for 4 mana, at which point it's fantastic. And playing it for for 5 mana still, you don't feel like you got ripped off.
Yeah, 5/5 Death Touches are a real bear to deal with.
Because the thing is, normally you might think it's kind of funny that a 5/5 has Death Touch or whatever, but a normal way to deal with a 5/5 is to block with 2 3/3s or a 4/4 and a 2/2, and this just punishes that.
It does. There's just no way around it. You're not getting out of this without spending a card. That's bottom line. So the question is just, can you get it on the battlefield at a point when it's relevant in the game? And I think the answer is yes. If you have any self-mill going, absolutely. You could get this thing down to 4 or 5 mana, and like you said, that's fine. I like C for Writhing Necromass. I think it's playable.
Oh, I think it's like a B-. I think this card's going to be... I really like where these things end up.
Okay. B- for Writhing Necromass.
I mean, you have to do a little work to make that happen, but I don't think that's crazy.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, maybe it's more build around. Like, I don't see how you could get into the B range with just a straight up. I mean, creatures don't die that much.
I think you have to do some work. I think it is a build around.
Okay.
But in a deck that can enable it, this card just comes out for 4, 3 mana and is just a huge threat.
It is. Yeah. It lets you double spell really effectively. Okay. That's it for black. That will move us to red. First card up is Flowstone Infusion. It's red for an instant at common. Target creature gets +2/-2 until end of turn. So we've got a shock variant here, ultimately.
Yeah, it's a shock variant that really punishes you if they have a pump spell in response, but it is a shock. Mm-hmm. Red has a spells matter theme, so it's pretty nice to have a 1-mana spell. I think this is a C.
Me too.
You'll be fine playing this card.
Occasionally you'll use it on your own creature to get in a huge hit. Hammerhand is next. This is red for an enchantment aura. At common, it enchants a creature, and when it enters the battlefield, target creature can't block this turn, and the enchanted creature gets +1/+1 and has haste. This card is a reprint. It's really annoying, and it's just it has the impact it has feels worse than it actually is in most scenarios.
There are times when this card will definitely win you the game, right? Where you're like, put this on my 4/4 that I just cast, make your one blocker unable to attack, crack in for 5. A lot of the time, though, this is just not going to do anything. I think Hammerhand gets a D, and generally I would avoid playing it.
Same.
Just too situational.
Phoenix Chick. It's a little baby Phoenix. It's red for a 1/1 flying haste Phoenix at uncommon that cannot block. And whenever you attack with 3 or more creatures, you may pay red. If you do, return Phoenix Chick from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped and attacking with a +1/+1 counter on it.
I like this little card. If you're an aggressive deck, it's nice. It works by far the best with sacrifice effects because you really want to get this into the graveyard because your opponent's not going to put it in the graveyard for you.
Right. They're just going to keep taking 1.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I like that. That seems really sweet. Turn 1, start pinging away with it, and then eventually sacrifice it and then get it back at some point down the line. And then it's actually a real card too. I mean, a 2/2 flying haste. That's I can't block, but I think you know the name of the game when you put Phoenix Chick in your deck. Yeah. You're not trying to block with it. What do you want to give it?
I would give it a C+. Yeah, I think that's about right.
It's cool. Viashino Branch Rider is red for a 1/1 Viashino Warrior at common. It's got kicker for 2 and a green, and it has haste. And if Viashino Branch Rider was kicked, it enters the battlefield with 2 +1/+1 counters on it. And you can pay 2 and a red to have it get +2/+0 until end of turn. That's a lot of text on a 1-drop common.
I would treat this as a red, green, gold card because you don't really want to put this in your deck unless you can pay the kicker. But if you can, 4 mana, 3/3 haste with a pump ability. Yeah, I'm in for that.
Yeah. And, and then if you don't have a better 1-drop or anything to do, this is one of those annoying 1-drops because you play it, you attack a couple times, and then you do get to attack it into their creature. And if they want to trade off, for your big chunk of mana and your 1-drop, then they can, but you have that threat of activation too. So that's pretty cool. C for Viashino Branch Rider?
Yeah, I like C for Branch Rider. Again, if you're in red-green, don't play this outside of that.
Electrostatic Infantry is 1 and a red for a 1/2 Dwarf Wizard at uncommon. It's got Trample, the old 1-powered Trampler. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn. Oh, sorry. Put a +1/+1 counter on Electrostatic Infantry, so even better.
Yeah, Electrostatic Infantry is amazing.
Yeah.
When your blue-red opponent plays this on turn 2, you start trying to think of what you can sideboard for the next game because they're going to play a cantrip. This will be a 2/3, then there'll be a 3/4, and then it's just the game's over.
Right. And it's just their 2-drop is smashing you, and you can't even chump it effectively.
I like this at B+.
Infantry is great.
So good.
Same. Me too. Like that is one of the scariest cards for blue-red. Fires of Victory is 1 and a red for an uncommon instant with kicker 2 and a blue. If the spell is kicked, draw a card. Fires of Victory, deals damage to target creature or planeswalker equal to the number of cards in your hand.
So early in the game, this will kill whatever it is you want to kill, right?
Yeah.
It's going to fairly easily do
5, that.
Yeah. And then late in the game, ideally you can kick it. I don't think I would be that stoked to play this if I couldn't kick it. Because imagine you play this in your red-white deck, and it's like, yeah, if I draw this early, it's going to be good. And if I draw it late,
pretty bad.
It's going to deal 1 to 2 damage, or I have to not play spells for 2 turns to make it work. So
right.
I would keep this for blue-red, and I would call it a C there.
Yeah, I like that too. Conditional, but early game, that card's going to be devastating. But of course, you don't have those big targets early, so it doesn't really scale correctly. Furious Bellow is next. This is 1 and a red for an instant at common. It says target creature gets +3/+0 and gains first strike until end of turn, and you scry 1.
They made Sure Strike even better.
Yeah. Yeah.
I still don't really want to put in my deck.
Same. You can, though. I mean, these are the type of cards that aren't embarrassing. I mean, they let you win combat over almost any scenario. Also, Furious Bellow against the Walls deck is really nasty. Gets basically any creature to kill any of the walls.
Yeah, I mean, if you want a combat trick, you can play this, but I think it's kind of like a D+. You're just not going to be...
That's how I feel, too.
Too excited about it.
Yeah. Gitu Amplifier is 1 and a red for a 1/2 human wizard at common. It's got kicker for 2 and a blue. And when it enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, return target creature an opponent controls to its owner's hand. Yeah, baby. And whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, it gets +2/+0 until end of turn.
I like this card.
Dope.
I mean, it's not the biggest when you kick it. You're like, slam my 5 mana Manowar, it's a 1/2, but it will attack as a 3/2 or 5/2 fairly often. And sometimes you're going to play this on turn 2 in your blue-red spells deck.
Yeah, and it'll do an electrostatic infantry impression that you won't really be super happy about. But
Timely Interference is a really good card, right? You know, the cantrip -1/-0 draw card.
Yeah.
Like, imagine that with this card. So I like the Amplifier. I would give it a C+. I think this is going to be a great card for blue-red. Obviously, do not put it in decks that can't kick it. That would just be foolish.
Oh, what a sweet one, though. Big, like a little baby Manowar. I love it. Goblin Picker. This is 1 and a red for a 2/2 goblin at common, and it has red, tap, discard a card, draw a card. So it rummages for some cost.
Look, I generally like the 2 drops that, you know, they attack and block early, and in the late game they have a little utility. This does both kind of mediumly, so I'm fine with it. I'm not excited about it. This is like pretty classic, like C- territory.
Yeah, that's how I feel too. This next card's not a C-. It's Lightning Strike.
Ooh.
You mentioned it earlier. 1 in a red, instant common. It does 3 damage to any target.
Yeah, I mean, it's not really complicated. Lightning Strike is fantastic. It can kill your opponent. It can kill almost any creature you need to kill. It's an instant. It costs 2 mana. And this is a B+,
Yes.
pretty firmly.
Also triggers all the stuff in that blue-red deck. Nasty. Smash to Dust is 1 in a red for a sorcery. It's common, and you can choose one. You can destroy an artifact, destroy a creature with defender, really, or you can or it can do 1 damage to each creature your opponents control. So sideboard, sideboard, sideboard.
Yeah, I mean, the idea is that by putting 3 sideboard effects together, it can maybe convince you to main deck it, but I'm not really buying that theory, so I would still give this a sideboard grade.
Yeah, me too. Sideboard for Smash to Dust, you'll know when you need it. Sprouting Goblin is next. It's 1 in a red for a 2/2 Goblin Druid at uncommon. It has kicker for green, and when it enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, search your library for a land card with a basic land type, reveal it, put it into your hand, and then shuffle. And you can pay red, tap it, and sacrifice the land to draw a card. Wow, that's got a lot going on.
I mean, I love this in red-green.
Seriously.
Civic Wayfinder, it's 3 mana for a 2/2 plus a land. That's amazing.
That's
and
insane.
then late game, it can start chewing up your lands for extra cards. So, again, I wouldn't play this if I couldn't kick it, but still, really good card if you can.
Yeah, I like B for Sprouting Goblin. I mean, it just has a lot going on. Yeah, that's sweet. Thrill of Possibility is 1 in a red for an instant. It's common, and it says it is an additional cost to cast this spell. Discard a card, draw 2 cards.
Yeah, I mean, this is a pretty standard card. Like, we've seen this printed 5 times now. It's good in the blue-red spells deck, and mediocre outside of that is basically what I would say.
That's right. Usually you just want to play one of them. Having multiples in hand gets kind of clunky. I guess you could just discard the other one. But at any rate, I would say D for Thrill of Possibility. You know, it's a type of card that makes the cut sometimes, and in the right deck can do enough to pull its weight, but generally speaking, isn't a card you want to play in most decks.
Yeah, and if you want it, you could probably pick one up.
What does Twinferno do?
This is kind of cool. It's a 1 in a red for an instant uncommon, and it's choose one. Either the next instant or sorcery spell you cast is copied, or target creature you control gains double strike until end of turn. So it's a copy spell that has like a buyout of like, oh, that wasn't going to be good. Okay, well in that case, let's give you a double strike trick. I don't really like either side all that much, but I could definitely see this being good in blue red with like the G2 amplifier. You're giving it double strike and hitting them for 10 out of nowhere.
Yeah,
or just copying lightning strikes or whatever. So if you think that you can utilize both halves fairly well, or at least one half really well, then I could see playing this. But in general, I would say Twinferno is kind of like a build around C, where the payoff isn't massive, and it's got a lot of potential to be dead.
Also going to be on the short list of cards we lose to a lot, but don't win with very much.
Yes.
Yavimaya Steel Crusher. Oh boy. It's 1 in a red for a 2/2 Ape Warrior. It's common, and it has enlist. I'm going to read enlist the first time, since this will show up multiple times. It says, as this creature attacks, you may tap a non-attacking creature you control without summoning sickness. When you do, add its power to this creature's until end of turn. And then this Steel Crusher also has 1 and sacrifice it to destroy an artifact.
I like this card a lot. It's a 2-mana 2/2. When you have enlist, it means it can attack as a 4/2 or a 5/2 to get through some walls or trade up. And then you can also sack it to kill an artifact. It's not like there's tons of those, but that's a lot of different things on a 2-mana 2/2, which is a good baseline.
Yeah, I like that a lot too. That's a solid C to C+ for me for Yavimaya Steel Crusher.
Yeah.
That's a bread and butter.
I would do C+ for Steel Crusher.
Okay. Red, white, particularly. Yosha Declares War is 1 and a red for a saga at uncommon with read ahead. Chapter 1 is create a 0/2 colorless Thopter artifact creature token with flying named, boom, baby, Ornithopter. That's sweet. You get an Ornithopter, although you have to pay 1 and a red for it now. Chapter 2 is tap any number of untapped artifacts you control. When you do, Yosha Declares War deals that much damage to target creature or planeswalker. And then chapter 3 is up to 1 target artifact you control becomes a creature with base power and toughness 4/4 until end of turn.
I just think it's so funny that they're like, we declare war. We're going to send an Ornithopter.
0 power coming at you.
This card looks really bad.
It's terrible.
Look, if this was an artifact set, you put this card into Kamigawa Neon Dynasty, all of a sudden, I could see a deck that's like really using it nicely.
Yeah.
It's just going to be bad here. I would not play it. I would say it's an F.
It's an F for Yosha Declares War. So next is Balduvian Berserker, and this is 2 and a red for a 1/3 core Berserker at uncommon. It's got Enlist, and when Balduvian Berserker dies, it deals damage equal to its power to any target. Nice. That's a great combo with Enlist.
Yeah. This kind of does the thing you were looking for, right?
Yeah. I like it. It is Enlist centric, right? You are getting a 1/3 for 3. So you do have to remember that, like, in order to make this thing actually decent, you need to be enlisting it a lot, which means you need to be aggressive, because enlisting does leave the shields down for race scenarios or things like that. So that's a thing, but they are going to have to deal with a 3 toughness creature that can get a lot of extra power every single turn. And when they finally do, they're going to take a very big hit from it. In fact, it could even just be lethal.
Yeah, because it can nug them.
Mm-hmm.
Also,
like
defensively, it can still trade up, as it needs to. Like, it's not.
It still does it even if you didn't enlist. A good point. It just, you can, hit something for 1 and then finish it off with an extra damage or ping a 1 toughness creature.
Or if you were able to pump it with like a pump spell or an equipment or something like at some other point in time. So I think that the Berserker does some pretty good work overall.
I like B- for the Berserker.
I like C+. I think it's solid, but I don't think it's like crazy good or anything.
A little too much work to get it up into the B range for you. Fair enough. Flowstone Kavu is 2 and a red for a 2/3 Kavu. It's common. It's got Menace, and you can pay red to give it +1, -1 until end of turn.
It's pretty solid. I mean, it's a 2/3 Menace for 3. And then you can hit for up to 4 damage, and if you can pump its toughness, you could even do more. Not that you're super likely to do that. But
is there a world where you enlist with this, like where you go like pump, it's 4 power, attack with my enlist creature, and then dump the 4 power onto the enlisted thing? Or is it just better to attack with a menace creature that's really hard to block?
That's part of what this is doing. Is if you have a Berserker, you could maybe make this a 4/1 to combo your enlist. I mean, that is, I think, upside. Yeah. I don't know how often that's going to end up being the play you make, but
solid
it
C
could
though
be that play.
For the Flowstone Kavu.
Yeah, I like C for Flowstone Kavu. I think it does its job.
Hurloon Battle Hymn is 2 and a red for an instant. It's uncommon and it has a kicker of white. And it does 4 damage to target creature or planeswalker, and if it was kicked, you gain 4 life. Wow. Yeah, 4 mana do 4 damage to a creature, and you gain 4?
Yeah, I mean, this is War Leader's Helix, except you even get the ability to play it for less.
That's incredible. Yeah, just 3 mana, do 4 damage, and don't care about the kicker for if you're blue-red or if you just don't happen to have the mana under you. 100% playable without the kicker in this case. That's incredible. That's race swinging level,
Yeah. I mean, Hurloon Battle Hymn's awesome. It's like an A-.
I think it's an A-. Yeah, I'm with you. If it could go to the head, it would be an A, but
it can't hit opposing players. Yeah. So you can't just finish them off, but it's still very, very strong.
Really, really good. A- for Hurloon Battle Hymn. Next is Keldon Strike Team. This is 2 and a red for a 3/1 human warrior. It's got a kicker of 1 and a red. And when it enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, you get 2/1/1 white soldier creature tokens. And as long as the strike team entered the battlefield this turn, creatures you control have haste. So basically those get haste.
Yeah, so it's a 3/1 and 2 1/1s for 5 mana. They all have haste, and then you end up in a spot where you get to just crack in for a bunch and make a bunch of tokens. I mean, it's what red white wants to do.
Seems really good to me. Also, so here's a question: if a creature has haste, does it not have summoning sickness? Or does it have summoning sickness but also have
I don't
haste?
think it does not. I think you can enlist with this if that's the question.
That's what I'm asking, yeah. So that's great. I mean, geez, right? Like, because if it has an attack, you just send it in, right? If it's going to trade for their 2/2 or just hit them, then great.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I like Keldon's strike team. This is solid. I mean, it's still C range for me, but that's pretty good for a 3/1 for 3.
Yeah, I think it's totally fine.
What about Warhost's Frenzy?
So this is 2 and a red for an instant uncommon. Creatures you control get +2/+0 until end of turn. It also has kicker of 1 black mana. And if you kick it, whenever a creature you control dies this turn, draw a card. So I think that this has something going for it, which is that, you get to like trade off a couple things, draw some cards, all that. But the problem generally is not that Trumpet Blast is not good. Mm-hmm. Like when you have a lot of creatures, it's when you don't have a lot of creatures, doesn't do anything. And this just runs into the exact same problem.
Right.
Like that doesn't change,
Right. Yeah. It doesn't move the needle for me.
So I think Warhost Frenzy has its place in some of these decks, but I don't think it's a card you should prioritize. And you're not often going to end up in a spot where this is exactly the card you can use.
Yeah, I mean, are we talking about a D or a build around something?
I think it's like a build around C. Like if you can pay the kicker and you've got a lot of creatures, it can do some pretty good stuff. I don't think it's necessary that you even actually pay the kicker. I mean, obviously that does make things better.
Yeah, agreed. Coalition Warbrute is 3 and a red for a 3/4 creature with enlist and trample. It's common.
Yeah, I mean it is exactly what it advertises to be, right? It's a 3/4 that can do some decent enlisting, and it's got trample. It's not exciting, but you'll put this card in your deck and you'll play it and it'll be all right.
Hey, that's a nasty combo, right? 4 toughness with enlist trample is like that's exactly what I want to see. So yeah, this thing is for only 4 mana, this is going to hit you as hard as a 5 or 6 drop would, right? And like you do have to deal with that. So
yeah, the trample is pretty nice.
It's really good. I like C for Coalition War.
I was give it a C. Yeah, it's just exactly the mid-range card.
Right. It's like a solid playable. It looks like Dragon Whelp, the OG 2 red, for a dragon with flying. It's uncommon. It's a 2/3, and you can pay red to give it +1/+0 until end of turn. But if this ability has been activated 4 or more times this turn, sacrifice Dragon Whelp at the beginning of the next end step.
There's a 0% chance they would ever put this text on the card, except that they literally wanted to reprint Dragon Whelp from Alpha.
Exactly.
Which I'm all here for, obviously.
Yes.
The card is good. It's a 2/3 flyer, which that brawls fairly well, and then it's going to do 3 or 4 damage a turn if you have extra mana. And then on the turn that you try to kill them, you just go all in, pump it 5 times, and it doesn't matter that it dies. They're dead.
Right, and they die.
So this is solid.
It's good.
Plus on Dragon Whelp.
Agreed. Yeah, it's a good card. It's crazy that card was printed in Alpha and is still like kind of a solid mid plus playable in current limited. Enthrall to the Pit. What is that English? What does it do? What does it do?
So the Pit is Lord of the Pit.
Yeah.
From Alpha. And Enthrall to is like in the grasp of.
Oh, okay.
Dominated by. So Enthrall to the Pit is 3 and a red for a sorcery at common with kicker 2 and a black.
Whoa.
So you gain control of a creature, untap it, it gains haste until end of turn. So it's a threaten, right? You're temporary, you steal it, gains haste and untap. But if you paid the kicker cost at the beginning of your end step, you also sacrifice that creature.
Oh, you just get to do the thing.
So it's the threaten plus sacrifice in one card, where it's a 4 mana threaten with a 3 mana sacrifice rider. What I think is interesting about this card is I would not put this in a deck with no other sacrifice cards, even though it solves itself. 7 mana is too much.
I see.
You can't just put a 7 mana removal spell in your deck. So if you want a 4 mana threaten, the kicker ability is a nice bonus because it means in the late game you just solves it. It automatically does it. but you would not put this card in your deck unless you naturally wanted the 4-mana version, because you're not just putting a 7-mana card in your deck.
Right.
So,
and this is a common, so you can pick these up for the sacrifice deck. So
yeah, Bone Splinters, or we're about to see Hurler Cyclops, cards like that. So
yeah.
I would give this a build around like B-. That's where these things tend to land in a good deck. In a deck that's optimized for them, they're really strong, because stealing their best creature and sacking it to kill their second best creature is a big swing, especially with a card you're going to get 10th pick sometimes.
Yes, and you can wheel and whatever. So yeah, I like build around BB plus for Enthrall to the Pit. Hurler Cyclops, you just mentioned, is 3 red for a 5/4 Cyclops at uncommon, and it has activated ability 1, sacrifice another creature, and Hurler Cyclops deals 1 damage to any target. So it's a well-statted, cheap sacrifice outlet, basically.
Yeah, I mean, 5-mana, 5/4, you're not looking for tons more than that to make it good. And the fact that this nugs any target means you don't even have to have a sack deck. Imagine your red-white deck that's got Keldon Strike teams. You play this. If you untap with it, your opponent's going to take 4 damage off it.
Yeah.
And, they have to do something. And then, of course, in the red-black deck, it even does more. So I like B- for Hurler Cyclops.
Me too.
I feel like this card's pretty threatening.
Yeah, the combo ability plus the ability to just, also, like, if you see your life total getting down to 7, 6, 5, and you're looking over and your opponent has 4 creatures and one of them's a Hurler Cyclops, like, they could just go sack my board, you're dead. Yep. Next is Jaya's Fire Nado, which is 4 and a red for a sorcery at common. It does 5 damage to target creature or planeswalker, and you scry 1. We've seen versions of this card pretty routinely, and they're always medium. They're DD pluses usually.
Yeah, it's just not a good lineup of mana cost plus effect. So right. I would give Jaya's Fire Nado a D.
Right. Sometimes you got to play one. It's that kind of removal. Maria's Outrider is 4 and a red for a 4/4 elf archer. At common, it's got reach, sneaky reach perhaps, and it has domain when it enters the battlefield. It deals damage to each opponent equal to the number of basic land types among lands you control. So a 5-mana 4/4 reach that can dome them for 2 or maybe 3 damage, or, in some crazy decks for 5.
Yeah, this card, I think this card is actually going to be one of the better cards. It doesn't necessarily look like it on its face, but if you can domain up to 3 to 5 on a somewhat reliable basis. Remember, the dual lands count for 2 types.
Right.
Imagine playing against a domain aggro deck that's base red-green, has a little bit of fixing, so it's a little slower. They just get you to 10. Then they play this and you're at 5. You're not feeling good about what's going to happen next.
No, that's scary territory.
You're going to get eaten again. So, and the fact that it's a 4/4 reach means it's got a real presence on the board.
Yeah.
I think Maria's Outrider is actually sneaky good. So I'm going to give this card a C+, and I think that some decks will have 3 of these and good fixing, and you're going to have a really hard time beating them.
Incidental damage decks, this is the type of thing that can really round out your curve. Last red card is called Molten Monstrosity. It's 8 mana, 7 and a red for a 5/5 with trample, but it costs X. It's a Hellion, and it's common, by the way. It costs X less to cast, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control.
I like the cycle. I think the cycle of cost reducers is really fun, because it really cool. Gives you it's just this nice bit of common build around, and I really appreciate that. I feel like this set's going to have legs for us. And Molten Monstrosity looks like a really solid addition to these red-green decks that have really 4 or 5 power creatures, because 5/5 trample is a big deal.
Yeah, and of course enlist is a combo with this as well. If your enlist creature survives the combat step, you just untap and pay 3 or 4 mana for this thing, and boom, it's a 5/5 trampler that they have to deal with. That's a lot. Yeah, I like it at C+ again, but I don't think it's a B, but maybe. Yeah,
I think the black and blue ones are the best, and I could see those both being closer to the B level, where it's you're you imagine this. You're at the Pro Tour. We're drafting Dominaria. I'm daydreaming here. And then I come over and you're like, how did it go? I'm like, well, I got 3 Tellurian Serpents and 12 spells in my deck. And you're like, dude, you did it. That's the sort of thing, right?
Bingo. Yeah. That'll be good on camera is what I would be thinking. So I'm going to go C+ for Molten Monstrosity.
I still like C+ for the Monstrosity.
Okay.
Yeah.
Green. First card up is Gaia's Might. This is green for an instant at common. And it says target creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn for each basic land type among lands you control. Is that what I want to scale with domain? No, it's not. I don't want my pump spell to get better.
I think this card's good.
Do you? I mean, come on. Really?
1 mana for +4/+4 is awesome. 1 mana for +3/+3 is still really good.
It's pretty good.
1 mana.
I just don't want giant growths in my domain deck. Like, I've got other stuff to do,
Well, one of the really cool things about this set, and one of the reasons I'm really excited to kind of dive into it, is they didn't just make domain ramp play all good cards. They actually seeded the cards for domain aggro. You've got the Outrider, you've got Gaia's Might, you've got a reason to be attacking them. And I think Gaia's Might's going to be a big piece of that. So in the right deck, it's like a C+. Look, your blue-green deck's going to play 0 of these, right? Mm-hmm. Your green-black deck, 0. Your red-green based domain deck that's playing some off-color duels and has a little fixing, it'll play 2 or 3 of these and be like, yes, this is great.
Okay. All right. I'm interested. I'm going to give it a D. Like, I just can't imagine a deck that has a bunch of mana fixing and ramp cards and then also has Gaia's Might in it. But
Raph Levy won back-to-back GPs because of this card. It has to be good.
Okay. It's an A.
I like build around like C+ for Gaia's Might.
Okay.
I think in the right deck, it's going to be really good.
I mean, yeah. Okay. Llanowar Stalker is next. It's green for a 1/1 elf warrior at common. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, Llanowar Stalker gets +1/+0 until end of turn.
No, I'm not in for this. This looks like garbage.
Terrible.
Gets an F from me.
F from me too. Hate those cards. Strength of the Coalition is next. It's green for an instant at uncommon. It's got a kicker of 2 and a white, and it says target creature you control gets +2/+2 until end of turn. If the spell was kicked, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control.
I like this one.
Wow.
Again, 1 mana trick to win early fights, and then at some point later, you're like +2/+2, and then everything gets +1/+1. And in fact, the creature you chose is going to get a +3/+3 bonus that turn. So
yeah, and for 4 mana instant speed too.
Yeah, so I like C+ for Strength of the Coalition.
Yeah, that seems very strong if you're going wide. Tail Swipe is next. This is green for an instant at uncommon. It says choose target creature you control and target creature you don't control. If you cast the spell during your main phase, the creature you control gets +1/+1 until end of turn. Then those creatures fight each other. So it's an instant speed fight, but if you happen to do it during your main phase, then your thing gets buffed a little bit first.
Yeah, I mean,
Fine.
It's going to be a good, efficient fight spell because usually +1/+1 is enough to win a fight.
Yeah.
So I like Tail Swipe. There's a reason it's uncommon. Use that little life hack. I would say Tail Swipe, it's like a B- just based on efficiency.
Right. And the times when you can instant speed it are when you're going to win the fight anyway. So there you go. Bite Down is 1 and a green for an instant at common. It says target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to target creature or planeswalker you don't control.
All right. So again, this is a bite, not a fight. And
isn't it just better than Tail Swipe? Mostly?
No, I actually don't think it is because Tail Swipe, the +1/+1, I think goes a long way towards letting you eat bigger things. Mm-hmm. I think they're both good. I think I would give this one probably a B- as well.
Okay. I like Bite Down quite a bit. I mean, it's just an instant all the time.
Yeah.
Colossal Growth. It's your favorite, another pump spell. This is 1 and a green for an instant at common. It's got a kicker of red. Target creature gets +3/+3 until end of turn. If this spell was kicked, instead that creature gets +4/+4 and gains trample and haste until end of turn.
I mean, they made the pump spells good in this set. What can I say?
That is a heck of a pump spell.
Like, this is going to end some games. Your opponent's going to try to chump your 5/5, and you're like, bam, now it's a 9/9 trample. The haste part is a little trickier. You're not going to use that all that often, but sometimes you're going to have this in hand. It's going to be a race. You're going to be like, come on, and you top deck on Molten Hellion and just get to get in there.
Yeah, well, I mean, even then, like, let's say you've got a 2-drop in your hand and you top deck Colossal Growth. I mean, you could just play the 2-drop if you got 5 mana, kick Colossal Growth. It's now a 6/6 trample haste that they didn't know about.
Yeah.
Yeah, you weren't kidding, man. These pump spells are pretty legit. I mean, they're still pump spells. Can't get too excited.
The fact that there's Gaia's Might, Colossal Growth, Strength of the Coalition, plus we just saw 2 fight spells, That's a lot, which does reduce the necessity of picking these up early. But I think Colossal Growth will be a solid card. I would give it a C. Like I think you'll put it in your deck, and this is the kind of card that really does punish the opponent.
I'm just kind of on tilt because the wall deck is just getting worse and worse with every one of these like insane pump spells. Speaking of, Floriferous Vine Wall is next. It's 1 and a green for a 0/2 plant wall at common with Defender, and when it enters the battlefield, look at the top 6 cards of your library. You may reveal a land card from among them and put it in your hand, and the rest go on the bottom in a random order. You're going to hit a land.
6 is a lot.
6 is a lot. If you whiff on 6, boy, you really are running bad.
So this card is solid if you're definitely good in the Defender deck, good in a multicolor deck or a defensive deck because it just gets your card back and gets you some selection here. So I like the Vine Wall. I'd give it a C+.
Same. I mean, it's a bad blocker. It's a 0/2, but you're really doing it to get a land. And of course, good. Seeing 6 cards means that even if you're trying to do the domain thing, you might be able to actually hit. Nishoba Brawler is 1 and a green for a star 3 cat warrior at uncommon. It's got trample and it has domain. Its power is equal to the number of basic land types among lands you control.
I am in for this. It's a 2 mana 2/3 trample with no work, and pretty easy to make it a 2 mana 3/3 trample.
Yeah.
That's a pretty big game.
It's a great target for your pump spells too.
I would give the Brawler just a B. I think it's just a great card.
That is really good, especially in red-green where it's just going to have a ton of power and toughness. Next up is Snare Spinner, which is 1 and a green for a 1/3 spider at common with reach, and whenever it blocks a creature with flying, it gets +2/+0 until end of turn.
I mean, Snare Spinner is fine. I would generally not be that excited about it.
Yeah, I think it's a sideboard card almost.
But if you need to survive, it'll do a good job of helping you survive.
Yeah, I would say sideboard. I mean, you can main it if you're in a primarily defensive deck, or if you need a 2-drop really, really bad. But I mean, it is just so ineffective on attacks. I like a Snare Spinner out of the board a little better. Sunbathing Rootwalla is 1 and a green for a 2/2 lizard at common. It's got domain. You can pay 3 and a green, and until end of turn, it gets +1/+1 for each basic land type among lands you control. And just in case you wanted to activate this ability twice in a turn, you can't. You can only do it one time.
The rule is surprisingly good. It's again a 2 mana 2/2, and then it just gets pretty threatening later in the game.
Yeah, 5/5, maybe a 6/6. Scales well. Sure.
Could be a 7/7. Why stop there?
Yeah, why stop dreaming? Yeah, okay. That seems fine to me.
What'll often happen is you'll play this and maybe trade off with something, right, if you want to. But let's say on turn 4 you have 3 different land types. You attack, they're not going to block, and then you play something else. And then when you run out of stuff to do, it's a 5/5.
You start pumping it. Yeah, that seems
just kind of ideal,
C-?
No, I'll give it a C.
C for Sunbathing Rootwalla.
You're disrespecting the Rootwalla if you give it a C-.
I am disrespecting this
a long
particular
and storied history in Magic.
Rootwalla. Yeah. Terra Sunder is 1 and a green for an instant uncommon. It's got kicker for 1 and a black. It says exile target artifact or enchantment. If this spell was kicked, exile target non-land permanent instead.
Basically,
have to kick it, right?
It's good. It's removal. It's a B level removal in a black-green deck, and not really playable outside of that. Maybe it's a sideboard card.
Yeah, sideboard card outside, and totally. If you can kick it though, yeah, instant speed, 4 mana, exile anything basically is great. So there you go. Vine Shaper Prodigy is 1 and a green for a 2/2 elf druid at common. It has kicker of 1 and a blue, and it says when it enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, look at the top 3 cards of your library. Put one of them into your hand and the rest on the bottom in any order. Nice.
I'm in for this. It's a 2 mana 2/2 that you can cast, anticipate if you want when you cast it.
That's great.
That's great. Yeah. I like C+ at Vine Shaper Prodigy. There is a glut of 4 mana cards, especially in blue-green, because you have, the Tallest Outlook, the 3/2 flyer that draws a card when it dies. So you be aware of that. But yeah, it is a very good card.
Yeah, I'm in for Organ Hoarder. Next is Yavimaya Iconoclast. This is 1 and a green for a 3/2 elf. It's uncommon. It's got a kicker of red, and it has trample. So already pretty pushed. And when it ETBs, if it was kicked, it gets +1/+1 and haste as well. Wow, that is a beatdown card.
Yeah, I mean, this card is a 2-mana 3/2 to start, and then with trample, and then sometimes it's a 4/3 haste. I would play this card even if I wasn't playing red, especially in a deck that can like maybe sometimes make red. You're going to find a lot of those decks, by the way, where you're like blue-green with a 1 red-green duel or something like that, or red-blue with a blue-white duel to pay the kicker on Tolarian Geyser. So this card, I think, does a good job in your aggressive deck. It's not great outside of aggro, but even then, a 2-mana 3/2 is still pretty beefy. So I like C+ on Yavimaya Iconoclast.
Same, and it's pushing B- range if you're, red
If you're
green
red-green
beatdown.
aggro, this is
like
pretty close to
nasty.
a B, yeah.
Bog Badger is next. This is 2 and a green for a 3/3 Badger. It's common. It's got a kicker of black. And when it ETBs, if it was kicked, creatures you control gain menace until end of turn.
Again, this mostly hinges how much do you want a 3-mana 3/3.
Right.
I think those are fine generally. I'm not unhappy to play them. I think this is basically a C-level card.
Yes.
And then sometimes you'll kick it for value.
Yeah, that's what it seems like to me too. Broken Wings. This is 2 and a green for an instant. It's common. It has destroy target artifact, enchantment, or creature with flying. Is this a set where you would main deck a Broken Wings? Probably not.
No, I would sideboard that.
Yeah, same. Sideboard card for Broken Wings, but it's probably the best sideboard card at common. Deathbloom Gardener is 2 and a green for a 1/1. Ouch. Elf Druid. It's common. It's got Death Touch, and it taps to add 1 mana of any color, which is kind of interesting because it certainly helps with kicker, but it doesn't help with domain.
It doesn't help with domain, but yeah, it does help with kicker. And the fact that your mana dork can then trade for anything is pretty nice.
It really is. I like Deathbloom Gardener. This is a cool design. This fits. This makes sense. I would give it a C. To me, this does the things that you want to do, but it's not really great at anything.
Yeah, I think it's a C.
Elvish Hydromancer is 2 and a green for a 3/2 elf wizard at uncommon. It's got a kicker of 3 and a blue. And when it ETBs, if it was kicked, create a token that's a copy of target creature you control. Wow, it has clone kicker?
Yeah, it's really sweet. So it's a 3-mana 3/2, which isn't exciting, but 7 mana, you get a clone of the best thing on your side. So yeah. They don't do enemy clones anymore, unfortunately.
And bare minimum this, right?
Yes, bare minimum this.
So 7 mana, 2 of these, but if you have anything better, you get this plus something. That's pretty nice.
Yeah.
It is asking a lot because you don't really want to pay 2 and a green for a 3/2 if you can't kick it. Yeah.
No, you're unhappy if you play the base level card, but you're pretty happy when you play the 7-drop, which is kind of how kicker. One of the ways that kicker can work out. Obviously, you'd rather be happier in both cases, but I think in general, playing 1 copy of Hydromancer is pretty good.
Yeah, agreed. Especially if you have any chance to kick it. I like it at C+ for Elvish. It is expensive. It is a top end card that you in a pinch can play beforehand, but it really sucks if you don't kick it. Like 3 mana 3/2 with no other things is not a good Magic card in these days.
Yeah. I think it's closer to a C than a C+, just because it's kind of expensive, but I think it is a good card.
Yeah, I just like it for that high-end ramp deck. Hexbane Tortoise is 2 and a green for a 3/2. Another one of those. This one's a turtle at common. It's got Ward 2 thanks to that shell, and it has enlist somehow. I like this less, right? Like 2 toughness enlist creatures seem pretty mediocre to me.
Yeah, this is when this trades, it's often not going to be trading for something that was like a fantastic deal. You're not like that excited about trading for it, right? Because you're going to frequently trade for something that is expensive enough, or this is expensive enough that when you trade, you're going to trade down some amount of the time. So
I don't like this card. Yeah,
I don't think it's great.
Hexbane Tortoise is a D for me.
Yeah, I would give Hexbane Tortoise a D. I don't think it's the 2 toughness does not line up well. This would be so much better at
as a 2/3,
as a 2/3 or something like that.
It would be excellent as a 2/3, and as a 3/2, I think it's pretty bad. Scout the Wilderness is 2 and a green for a sorcery at common. It has kicker of 1 and a white. Search your library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield, tapped, and then shuffle. If this spell was kicked, create 2 1/1 white soldier creature tokens. Boom. There's your there's your enabler for domain.
Yeah, it does do that, but I don't really love the combination here where the decks that want domain and ramp and the decks that want tokens are not generally the same deck. So you'll play this in your domain deck, especially since it's like a 3-mana ramp spell that sometimes I'll get 2 chump blockers out of the way. But like the kicker here of making some soldiers is a lot less powerful than the kicker on like the Keldon Strike team where your red-white deck is really wanting that. So I think this is like a C-. I just think the base card is not that impressive, and the kick version is also not that impressive.
I think it's just one of those cards that you have to play if you want to do the 5-color domain. It's just you have to do it. And then occasionally you'll get the 2 things. I don't think the
Or you can play the next card.
Yeah, or this one, the Weatherseed Treaty. So this is 2 and a green for an uncommon, of course, enchantment saga with read ahead. Chapter 1 is search your library for a basic land card, put it on the battlefield, tapped, and then shuffle. Chapter 2 is create a 1/1 green sapperling creature token. And Chapter 3 is domain. Target creature you control gets +X/+X and gains trample until end of turn, where X is the number of basic land types among lands you control. Not skipping Chapter 1 very often on this one.
No, it's it is Chapter 1 is the main reason you play this card.
Right.
Though obviously you can play you can getting the trample. Sometimes in the late game what you're going to do is play this, skip to number 3, and immediately get +5/+5 and trample. So
yes,
you do want to keep that in mind. But yeah, overall Chapter 1 is like kind of the meat here. What I like about this card is early in the game, Chapter 1's great because you get your domain ramp going. And then late in the game, you can just immediately go to the pump spell or the creature into pump spell if you don't care about the land anymore.
We know where you're going with it.
Yes.
Right to the pump spell. So how much better is this than Scout the Wilderness? It's not that much better, right?
Oh, it's quite a bit better. You get basically the same card, like for 3 mana instead of 5 mana plus the pump spell aspect. Because getting 1 token and 2 is pretty similar.
No, that is true. Yeah, and the pump spell with the trample is a game ender potentially. So it is a lot better. Where does it come down for you? Is it just a B?
I would give it a B-. I think it's good. It is nice that like you get to a land and a 1/1 and probably forces through some damage. You give your 3/3 +4/+4 and attack for 7, something like that.
Yeah, that is good. That's a really nice progression. All right, B- for the Weatherseed Treaty. I'll be looking to pick those. Barkweave Crusher is 3 and a green for a 2/5 elemental warrior at common, and it has enlist. All right, so we didn't like the 3/2 for 3 with enlist and some other stuff. How do we feel about the 2/5 for 4 with enlist?
Not better, but not like a lot better. I mean, I think this is like close to a C-level card as opposed
C-
to
maybe
like C- more. Like I can't imagine in a draft seeing this and wanting to take it before 5th or 6th pick.
Right, that's how I feel too. I just can't imagine that this is the card that people care about in this format. So C- for Barkweave Crusher. Next is Magnagoth Sentry. It's 3 and a green for a 4/4 tree folk. It's common and it has reach.
Yeah, this is a nice combination of like you play this, and if they have nothing, you're going to rumble over and smack them for 4, and it stops some flyers fairly well.
Yeah,
but it doesn't do either of them so fantastic that I'm jumping out of my seat to pick it. I would give it a C.
Me too. 4 power for enlisting is nice if you don't need the blocks, but you kind of just want to turn this sideways in that scenario anyway. Yeah, C for Magnagoth Sentry. Next is Elfim Worm. This is 4 and a green for a 5/4 worm at common with vigilance and trample. Boy, they kept it simple with green this time, didn't they?
Yeah, not really that complicated.
It's like enlist, reach, vigilance, trample.
Not a huge fan of.
I think this card's not going to perform very well
of this either. I mean, look, if you want to spend 5 mana, you get 5 mana's worth. Vigilance and trample is 2 decent keywords, but again, this just feels like you ended up here because you didn't have better options. It's not something I'm excited about.
Right, and this slot, the 5-drop slot's usually pretty competitive. I would give it D.
No, it's a little better than that. I think it's like a C actually.
Really?
Vigilance Trample is kind of nice now that I'm thinking about it with all these pump spells. I don't know.
God.
I think it's okay.
You just see the world through pump spells now. You've changed, man. No, I'm a D on it. I just these type of French vanilla creatures
come for you,
don't do it. Yeah, if I die to it a bunch, we'll revisit. Linebreaker Baloth is next. It's 3 green for a 4/5 beast at uncommon. It's got enlist, and it can't be blocked by creatures with power 2 or less.
See, this I like. I mean,
that's
this is
a hitter.
This hits for a lot. You can easily imagine attacking for 7 or 8 damage and they can't jump it. Seems pretty nice to me.
And 5 toughness makes it very difficult to block with just one creature.
Plus, imagine if you enlist and they block and you have one of those pump spells.
That is pretty good, actually. I like B for Linebreaker Baloth. Just seems to just smash super hard.
Yeah, I like B for that.
Here. What about this one? Slimefoot's Survey. Look at him. He's got his little, what are those called? Monoscope. Yeah, it's awesome.
Not a big fan of this. 5 mana. So it says 4 to green. You get to search your library for 2 land cards that each have a basic land type. So you can get duels. You can get some of these duels with it. Put them on the battlefield tapped. Then look at the top X cards or X number of basic land types among lands you control and put 1 on top and the rest on the bottom. I don't want to pay 5 mana
sorcery speed.
Like ramping at 5 mana is just not that impressive, you know?
No, it's not. This is meant to get you from 3 domain to 5 domain, I guess.
Yeah.
Like for the full on domain deck, but I agree. I've never played a ramp spell at 5 that I was happy with, ever. So D? F?
I like D for Slimefoot Survey. Or F. You just shouldn't put this card in your deck, unfortunately.
It's just not how it works. Territorial Morrow. Morrow's back. 4 and a green for a star creature, elemental at uncommon. It's got domain, its power and toughness are each equal to twice the number of basic land types among lands you control. Wow. That's big.
Yeah, I mean, this is easily going to be a 6/6, sometimes 8/8 or 10/10.
Yeah.
This is a build around B in your domain decks. This is what you want. It's a 5 mana 8/8, you know?
Yeah, that's pretty cool with enlist too. Mossbeard Ancient is 5 green for a 7/7 tree folk at uncommon. It's got trample, and when it enters a battlefield, you gain 5 life.
Nice.
Now tell me you like this card.
7 mana, 7/7 trample, gain 5. It shores you up your life total. Very large, has trample. Yeah, I'm in for Mossbeard Ancient at B.
Same. This is a fantastic ramp target. Really great. If it had reach instead of trample, it would be perfect, but not everybody's perfect. Yavimaya Sojourner. This is the 8-drop for green. It's 7 and a green for a 4/6 with domain. It's a tree folk, by the way, at common. It costs 1 less for each basic land type among lands you control. So you can get 2 off of the top sort of for free, right? So it says 8 mana, but really it's 6. And then, you could get it down to 5, 4, or even 3 mana.
Yeah, I'm not super impressed with this. I think this one I don't think gives you enough of a discount
at the
time you want.
Right? So, like if it was a 4 mana 4/6, we would still be like, okay. 5 mana 4/6 is like not even playable.
Yeah.
3 mana 4/6 is impressive, but you need to do that on turn 3 to make it really good, and you can't do that. So I think Yavimaya Sojourner is just a big fat miss.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, let's go to our last color, which is white. And white starts with Clockwork Drawbridge, which is white for a 0/3 artifact creature wall with Defender. It's common, and you can pay 2 and a white and tap it to tap a creature.
No.
God, that's too expensive, right?
It's just way too expensive. The problem is that 0/3 doesn't block well, especially in this set. And then 3 mana to tap a creature is not a good deal. This isn't enough. You should not put this card in your deck.
It sucks because that's the type of card that I really like to look for, but that's too expensive. Runic Shot is white for a sorcery at uncommon. It's got kicker of blue, and it says destroy target tapped creature at sorcery speed, mind you. If this spell was kicked, scry 2.
Solid. 1 mana for removal is really nice.
It really is. You do have to take a hit from the thing.
Yeah, but I mean that's true.
That's often true.
Exactly. Regardless. And 1 mana is so efficient. Imagine your turn 5, you're like, kill your 4-drop that hit me for 4 and play a 4-drop of my own. You'll feel pretty good. Plus, if you can kick it, you get a nice little scry. Don't consider it as a blue-white card. It's a mono-white card, but if you can scry, that's additional value.
Mm-hmm. That's a bonus. So what do you like it at, like C?
No, I would give this like a C plus.
Okay, you like it because it's so cheap to just ultimately kill a creature. Okay,
Yeah.
C plus for Runic Shot. Artillery Blast is 1 and a white. For an instant at common, it says Domain. It deals X damage to target tapped creature, where X is 1 plus the number of basic land types you have. So minimum 1, probably,
Really,
3.
Really minimum 2.
Yeah, minimum 2. Right, literally minimum 2. You're right.
Cast this off nothing.
Right, so minimum 2 and then probably 3 on average, right?
Yeah.
Which is probably where it's going to stop. I mean, unless you're splashing it or something.
The domain decks will use this efficiently, right? They'll play this as like their splash removal that does 4 or 5.
Yeah, and this actually does hit like attacking creatures and stuff like that because it's an instant.
So this is a good defensive card, or if you're like a flying-based aggro deck, you don't want this in your like red-white aggro deck because then you end up in a spot where you can't kill the things you really care about.
Blockers, right?
In a domain deck or like blue-white flyers deck, I would say this is a C. It's a solid piece of removal.
C, yeah, and I would view it primarily as killing small creatures, for what that's worth, unless you can go full domain.
Small to medium.
Yeah. Banalish Faithbonder is 1 and a white for a 1/3 human cleric at common. It's got vigilance and it also has enlist, which I kind of like on a 1/3 with vigilance. That's a sweet spot, right?
These are the stats that you're kind of interested in. I would give this a C minus. I'm still not that impressed. Like you're going to do a little work to get a 3/3, but I think it is solid and if it counts as a decent 2-drop.
Yeah, that's where I'm at for. Do you say Benalish or Banalish?
Banalish.
Banalish Faithbonder. Banalish Sleeper is next. It's 1 Sleeper. What are you doing, bud? 1 and a white for a 3/1 creature. It's a Phyrexian human soldier. Oh, it's common and it has Kicker of Black. And when Banalish Sleeper enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, each player sacrifices a creature. Both players.
So it's a 2-mana 3/1 or remember the gluttonous guy, the 3-mana 3/1 where you both sack a creature?
Yeah.
So it's fine because it's an aggressive 2-drop. It works well with enlist, right, as a high power. And then if you can pay the kicker and you can sack a token or you have something bad or they just have one creature in play, it can do some work. I still think the card is kind of medium all combined.
Yeah, that's how I
would
feel.
I would give it a C. You're just going to play a 2-mana 3/1 some amount of the time.
Yeah, like you said with the enlist combo too. Destroy Evil. Boy, they've really bottomed out on the card names here. 1 and a white for an instant. It is common, and it says choose 1, destroy target creature with toughness 4 or greater, or, kind of weird, destroy target enchantment.
I think this is an okay card to main deck. It's not that there's tons of enchantments, and killing sagas isn't really my dream either because they got at least 1 chapter's worth. But there's a lot of kind of big creatures. There's a cycle of the cost-reduced creatures, which means every color is going to have something large. There's all these great pump spells. I've heard pump is really, the hot thing right now.
This is the anti-pump spell for sure.
Yeah. At this point, I would start by main decking one of these if you have a removal slot, and I wouldn't be like super stoked about it.
Yeah, I think it's borderline. I mean, the one real knock against it is that it doesn't work against enlist, and that's tough.
Yeah.
Tough pill
I'm
to
sure
swallow.
that was intentional as well.
Yeah. I think I would give it a D for Destroy Evil. Not a big fan.
I would give it like a C minus.
Like if I saw a forest, I'm just putting Destroy Evil in my deck like straight away. But
yeah.
Juniper Order Root Weaver is 1 and a white for a 2/2 human druid at common. It's got Kicker of Green, and when it enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. Nice.
So it's a 2-mana 2/2 or a 3-mana 3/3, but you can move the counters around as you see fit.
Yeah. I would play this in white green all day.
Yeah, I would basically always play this in white green and try to avoid playing it anywhere else.
Yeah.
And give it a C. So it's just a solid mid-range card.
Agree. Next is Knight of Dawn's Light. That is 1 and a white for a 2/2 human knight at uncommon. It's got first strike. And if you would gain life, you gain that much life +1 instead. And you can pay 1 and a white to pump it +1/+1 until end of turn.
Card's amazing.
Yeah, that's great.
I mean, look.
How do you
play a
interact
2-mana
with it in
2/2
combat?
first strike?
Yeah.
they can't block it for like 4 turns.
Yeah.
Because like, what are you going to block it with a 3/3? You can just pump it. Block with a 4/4, same. By the time they can block it, maybe you have tricks or removal or whatever, and it's just going to get in for 2 every single turn until you run out of stuff. At which point it starts getting in for more.
Right.
I'm a big fan of Night of Dawn's Light, and the again, just like the Night of Dusk's Light or whatever, the extra text is not that big of a deal. This is a B+ without that text. This card is it's really hard to overstate how well First Strike and Pump +1/+1 interact in terms of how hard this is to take down in combat.
Such a scary card to see across the table on turn 2. Like if you have the ability to kill it, get that thing off the battlefield because it's going to wreak havoc on your life total. B+ for Night of Dawn's Light. Next is Phyrexian Missionary. This is 1 and a white for a 2/3 Phyrexian Human Cleric at uncommon. It's got a kicker of 1 and a black. It's got lifelink, so 2 mana 2/3 lifelink with a kicker. It says when it enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. Dang.
Another awesome card. I mean, 2 mana 2/3 lifelink. You're just going to cast that turn 2 and be happy a lot of the time.
No
and
kidding.
And then 4 mana 2/3 lifelink that gets your best creature back.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's a great card.
Extremely in.
Yeah, I like B+ actually for Phyrexian Missionary as well.
Yeah, same.
That's
I think
amazing.
the card is very strong.
Resolute Reinforcements is 1 and a white for a 1/1 uncommon human soldier with flash. And when Resolute Reinforcements enters the battlefield, you get a 1/1 white soldier creature token. So you're getting 2 bodies at instant speed for 1 and a white.
Yeah, it's Raise the Alarm, except one's a creature, which actually makes it a lot stronger.
That's better, yeah.
You can bring it back from your graveyard, and you can do various things like that.
Bounce it, yeah.
This is good in the decks that want tokens. It's going to fit really nicely into like white, red, and white, black primarily. I would give it a C+. I think that this card carries a lot of weight.
Definitely, because there's a lot of payoffs that we've seen even at the common and uncommon level for having a bunch of small creatures.
They attack with a 2/1 and you just cast this and block with one of the tokens. And it's filthy. That's great,
Samite Herbalist is 1 and a white for a 2/1 human cleric at common. And whenever Samite Herbalist becomes tapped, you gain 1 life and scry 1. So this is your enlist pumper.
Yeah. You're comboing it with enlist. Mostly it's just mediocre. I would give this probably a D+. Just 2/1s for 2 are just not that exciting,
Yeah, I would really want a lot of enlist to be excited, and then I am. I mean, gaining a life and scrying 1, every turn, air quotes, that adds up really fast and can be very strong. But it's just this thing can't attack on its own really ever. So
it'll attack once and then die, and then that's fine too.
And that's okay too if it trades, but not a huge upside. I like D for Samite Herbalist. I think we'll see it in the enlist decks, and outside it probably won't see much play.
Yeah, I agree.
Take Up the Shield is a 1 and a white for an instant. At common, it says put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. It gains lifelink and indestructible until end of turn.
I mean,
combat trick.
That's a pretty strong combat trick. Like getting +1/+1 means you're probably punching up a little bit. Indestructible means it's pretty hard to lose the fight, even if you don't win it. Mm-hmm. And then lifelink means you gain 3 or 4 or 5 life off the deal. So
and it keeps the counter.
Yeah.
I mean, even in like a maybe not desperate, but in a bad scenario, you could just be like block, take up the shield. My guy gets bigger. I get a bunch of life, and I still have my creature. Like that's your pretty terrible case scenario.
You might also just like attack with a 4/4 and just cast it to gain 5 and pass the turn.
Yeah, like that's tough to beat sometimes.
I think all that adds up to like a C.
Yeah, this is actually another good combat trick, as much as I hate to say
spells, finally.
Yeah, well, we're here. You remember when you like 7-drops? Argivian Cavalier is next. It's 2 and a white for a 2/2 Orc Knight at common, and it has enlist. And when Argivian Cavalier enters the battlefield, you get a 1/1 white soldier creature token.
Yeah, this is nice. This is a nice little combo. 3 mana for a 2/2 plus a 1/1 is already a good deal. And then this can attack as like a 3/2, 4/2, maybe 5/2, depending on what's going on, and force your opponent to do something about it.
Yeah. And it builds out your board for the things that care about going wide. I like that.
I like C+ for Argivian Cavalier.
I think this will be a bread and butter 3-drop for the format. Charismatic Vanguard is 2 and a white for a 3/2 dwarf soldier at common, and it's got an activated ability. It's a big one. It's 4 and a white. Creatures you control get +1/+1 until end of turn. So there's yet another way to capitalize on having, your Argivian Cavaliers and your Resolute Reinforcements.
Yeah, this is a decent creature. I mean, 3/2 again is kind of like her stat line of like I trade down for 2-drops, but the pump ability is good, and I think having like one of these in a lot of your white decks is going to feel all right.
Yeah, especially just as a random common that you don't really have to fight for.
Yeah, I mean, I would give it like a C-. I'm not super stoked about it.
I think I actually have it at D. Like, I think that you're going to not play it all the time, but Citizen's Arrest. Oh boy, this looks like it got really ugly. 1 white for an enchantment at common. When Citizen's Arrest enters the battlefield, exile target creature or planeswalker an opponent controls until Citizen's Arrest leaves the battlefield.
I like this a lot more than the normal arrest type cards because those cards are vulnerable to bounce, right? You arrest their guy, a few turns later they draw a bounce spell, bounce their own creature, and then all of a sudden your thing falls off. This they have to have it right away because it exiles the creature.
Right.
So
and then they have to have an enchantment removal of some sort.
Right,
if they ever
and they
want to
can't sacrifice the creature for value either unless, again, they do it right away in response. So all that together makes Citizen's Arrest like a B-, whereas like the straight up like enchanted creature can't attack or block usually fell more of the C range. Yeah,
this is going to be your bread and butter common white removal spell. It's a very strong one. Cleaving Skyrider is 2 and a white for a 2/2 human warrior at uncommon. It's got flash and a kicker of 2 and a red, and it's got flying. So flash flying 2/2 for 3 mana. But if you pay 6 and another color, when it enters the battlefield, it deals X damage to any target where X is the number of attacking creatures.
This card's going to end a lot of games. You attack with 5 creatures. You play this, nug them for 5. You could also just, kill a blocker before blocks. There's a lot of stuff you can do here.
So timing-wise, we should probably talk about this, right? Because there is a scenario where you're like attacking with a bunch of creatures, and then before damage, you're like cleaving Skyrider, and you're dead. But then they may have something that could interact that they wouldn't have used unless they knew that the Skyrider was coming, right? So you can allow damage to happen, right? And then cast the Skyrider?
Yeah, you'll lose some attacking creatures, though.
If they got blocked?
Yeah. So you might end up in a spot that you're kind of unhappy about as a result.
Yeah, so just be aware that if this scenario presents itself, you can wait until damage happens and still count attacking creatures in your end of combat step and cast the Cleaving Skyrider, though that does feel like a very narrow case, but it's just something to keep in mind. So how good is the card? Seems excellent. Yeah.
I mean, a 3-mana 2/2 flying flash is already good for your aggressive decks. And then you add this like super finisher potential / being able to just kill one of their big creatures. I think this is a B+. I think red-white decks are going to be really, really impressed with the card.
Yeah, Cleaving Skyrider looks super good in red-white. And you can play it in any white deck, and then it goes down to C+ or, somewhere in that range. Join Forces. This is 2 and a white for an instant. It's uncommon. It says untap up to 2 target creatures. They each get +2/+2 until end of turn.
I mean, it's fine. Like this card is a decent trick. You can pick up a 2-for-1 every now and then. I would say overall Join Forces is like a C.
Mm-hmm. I mean, are you a fan of using this offensively? Attack with my 2 things. They like no blocks, and you just cast it, untap your things, you get in for an extra 4, and you have effectively vigilance?
And you probably don't want to do that, but obviously it could depend on the situation.
Okay.
Obviously, you'll be really happy anytime you can get a 2-for-1, and sometimes you'll just settle for a 1-for-1 with 2 extra damage, and now your creatures are untapped for their turn, that sort of thing.
Okay. So how high is this? I mean, you're the combat trick expert here.
I think it's a C. I think that there's a lot of combat tricks. They all compete for each other, and you don't want to play usually more than 2. Mm-hmm. So it's not looking to me like you should be prioritizing them.
Yeah, these ones are super tough because this one has the highest upside of the ones that we've seen. Like this can be a devastating blowout. Like if they're like block, and you just kill both of their things, have both your guys back on blocks, like it is really nasty, but it is difficult to set that up. Next is Love Song of Night and Day. This is 2 and a white for a saga at uncommon. It's got read ahead, and chapter 1, you and target opponent each draw 2 cards. Now, chapter 2 is create a 1/1 white bird creature token with flying. All right. And chapter 3 is put a +1/+1 counter on each of up to 2 target creatures. All right.
So
just
stats wise, you get a
2.
You get a 2/2 flyer, right? Assuming you're going to put a counter on that, and then a +1/+1 counter on something else, and that's already pretty good.
Yeah,
like a 3-mana 2/2 flyer that puts a +1/+1 counter somewhere, like you'd be in for that.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you want, you can do chapter 1. I don't think it's crazy to do that. So the time when both players are drawing 2 cards, it's actually good in the aggro decks. Basically, when both players have a lot of cards in hand, it's usually better to do this, especially if you're the one with the lower curve. So imagine you go 2-drop into this on turn 3 and your opponent's just gone land, go. They might even have to discard.
Right. And they're just not going to be able to deploy as many cards from their hand as you can.
If all your spells are cheap, basically decks that play this are frequently trying to end the game before the opponent has cast all their spells. If that's the case, then this is not no drawback, but definitely less of one.
Yeah, for sure. So I could see starting it, honestly, at any of the 3 chapters. I think most common will probably just be 2, make a 1/1, and then get the counters going and keep smashing if you're a little in an aggressive stance.
Yeah, I agree.
What do you like for Love Song of Night and Day? It's a hard card to grade.
I think this card's closer to a B than a C. I think it's like a C plus B minus. Like, I don't know. Imagine you played a 2-drop into this on the play. You got to just do the draw 2 thing. That seems pretty good.
Yeah. Okay. C plus B minus for Love Song of Night and Day, depending. Mesa Cavalier is 2 and a white for a 2/1 human knight at common. It's got flying, and when it enters the battlefield, you gain 2 life.
Just compare this with the stupid Inspiring Overseer, and it's
incredible.
Just like, what's going on there?
Incredible.
If you want aggressive creatures, this card is fine.
Yeah,
it's not that exciting outside of that, but it's fine in that deck.
Yeah, blue-white probably is interested. Red-white's probably interested. Sure. This looks like a C to me.
Yeah, I think it's a C.
I mean, it's crazy that cards like this are just a C, but what does Stall for Time do?
Like this one. This is 2 and a white for an instant at common. It's got kicker of 1 and a blue. Tap up to 2 target creatures. If you've kicked it, you put a stun counter on them, and you draw a card.
Wow.
So
that's a big swing. Yeah.
So this card does some good work for sure.
Yeah. So if you get up to that 5 mana with the 2 colors, that is changing the outcome of a game pretty often. Yeah,
getting to tap 2 things for a whole extra turn cycle and it replaces itself is really nice.
Right. And the trick, of course, is to do this on your opponent's turn before they attack. That'll tap down the creatures. They don't get to attack that turn. On your turn, you get to smash them. Then you say go. They remove stun counters, but those creatures are still tapped where they're not going to be able to block or attack. And then you get to smash them again. A lot of times the game's just over at that point. So,
yeah.
What do you want to give it?
I would give Stall for Time a C+.
Yeah, if you can kick it with blue.
I mean, the blue
getting
and
the
white
card
kicker
backs
spells are really nice.
Dope.
Like Tellurian Geyser and Stall for Time are both like cantrip tempo spells that like have a really good effect on the board. So I'm pretty excited about them.
Captain's Call is 3 and a white for a sorcery at common. It says create 3 1/1 white soldier creature tokens. Well, there's the line, right? Because we've been talking about the payoffs for the small creatures. This is not a great way to make them, right? 4 mana, sorcery speed. They're all just the little 1/1s. If this card's good, or if this card sees a decent play, then you know that those payoffs are legit for that deck.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, I don't think I'd really be that interested in this card.
I think that in general, this card is very much, if you're doing this thing, you play it, you do not play it otherwise.
Right.
The Cavalier, right? The 3 mana 2/2 that makes a 1/1. Like that's a card I'll put in, I think, basically every white deck, right?
Yeah.
So whereas the Captain's Call, like you got to be doing the red-white tokens thing or the black-white tokens thing.
Yeah. I would give this, like a C in that deck. Like, I think it's fine. And I think outside of that deck, it's not very interesting.
Yeah.
Coalition,
I think it's a build around C.
Build around C, right. Coalition Sky Knight is 3 and a white for a 2/2 flying human knight at uncommon, and it has enlist. So we've seen that they've been very, very selective about the types of evasion that they put enlist on. Here's a flyer. We have one with trample. It's also an uncommon. Like, you can tell that when they play tested this, like if they just threw it on a bunch of cheap commons, cheap evasive creatures, that was too much. And that means to me that this card, has been dumbed down a bit so that it doesn't just end the game super fast.
Yeah.
But that means it's probably pretty strong. Like enlist plus flying is really good.
Yeah, I think that it's okay, but it's still just expensive enough that I'm just not that impressed with it.
That's what I mean. Like you could, I guarantee you there was a version of this card that cost like three. Yeah. And they were like,
and they're like, oh, this attacks for way too much damage.
All right. Maybe get it in for 5 in the air the next turn's a little much or whatever. So
I would give the Coalition Skynet a C. I'm just not super into it.
I think it's going to be a legitimately scary threat when it hits the battlefield. But the fact that it's so slow and so small means that your opponent will have their mana under them and their removal spells ready to go. So if it's ever going to do things, they will just kill it. And that's not great. Griffin Protector. This is 3 and a white for a 2/3 Griffin at common. It's got flying. And whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, Griffin Protector gets +1/+1 until end of turn. This is a card that's been printed a few times in core sets. And, this is what we were talking about. Like, this is another payoff for cards like Captain's Call or Argivian Cavalier, right? These are ones that were like, boom, all of a sudden it's hitting for 4 or 5 in the air on a turn, and you can actually make it into a real thing. Because 4 mana for a 2/3 flyer is a bit below the curve, as we've seen, where you can now get a 2/3 flyer for 3.
Yeah, I think you can do a little bit better than that. Yeah. And if it reliably attacks for 4 damage, I guess I'd be pretty happy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, to me, it's a weird thing to say, but I would put this in a closer to the build around camp. Again, if you have Captain's Call in your deck, Griffin Protector, you're going to be happy. But if you don't want that one, you probably don't want this one that badly either.
Yeah.
Heroic Charge is 2 white for an instant at common. It says creatures you control get +2/+1 until end of turn. But if it was kicked, which costs 1 and a red, those creatures also gain trample until end of turn.
Yeah, this is kind of more of the same, where it's like, if you want this, then it's going to be good. And if you don't want it, then like it's just really bad. The trample part is not even a big deal. Like,
it's optional. If
basically the determination of whether I play Heroic Charge is, do I go wide enough? The red kicker doesn't really inform that a whole lot.
Right. And by the way, that's something that we've been trying to note on all of the kicker cards. If you've noticed, there's some that are optional kicker, and there's some that are like, if you can't kick this, don't play it. So just keep note of that. This is the optional kicker card. I mean, look, if you're going wide, this card's devastating, right? You don't need much, right?
And it's Inspired Charge, which has always done some good work in the decks that want it. But and look, the trample part's not bad. If you end up in a red-white deck, sometimes you'll just cast this with the trample because that'll get 4 extra damage in or whatever it is.
Right. And, I know it sounds weird, but don't be afraid to use this defensively. Don't be afraid to use this on one creature. Like, sometimes you got a 5/5 and they block with their 5/5 and you're just like, Heroic Charge. My creature wins combat. It can be a clunky combat trick when needed. It's actually more flexible than it looks, because I think you kind of lock in on, I need 4 creatures out when I cast this. And yes, that is the best scenario, but you absolutely can use this in other ways too. So don't be afraid to. I like it at C+ in the go wide deck. Outside of it, it loses a lot of utility pretty quickly.
Yeah, I would say build around C it sounds about right to me.
Yeah. Prayer of Binding is 3 and a white for an enchantment. At uncommon, it's got flash, and when it enters a battlefield, exile up to 1 target non-land permanent an opponent controls until Prayer of Binding leaves the battlefield, and you gain 2 life.
Great card. I mean, this is exactly what you want to be doing. So,
fantastic card.
Yeah, you were quite happy to play that.
I like B+ for it.
Yeah, B+. It's an Oblivion Ring with flash that also gives you 2 life.
Yes.
There's really nothing wrong with that,
That's a lot to like. Wingmantle Chaplain is 3 and a white for a 0/3 human cleric and uncommon. It's got Defender, and when it enters a battlefield, you get a 1/1 white bird creature token with flying for each creature with Defender you control. Whenever another creature with Defender enters a battlefield under your control, you get another one of those birds. Oh, man.
Yeah, it's great. In. I mean, this is a bird for every defender, including itself, and then every defender in the future as well. So it does some good stuff.
You sure I can't play Clockwork Drawbridge? Are you sure I can't just...
Okay, if you had enough of the defender stuff, you could.
Okay.
Because it's a cheap defender. I think that would be fine. But
yeah.
in general, I think that you're not going to want to do that. I like Wingmantle Chaplain as a build around B.
Me too.
If you're playing the Defender deck, it can really do some good work.
It might even be a build around B plus if you can go all the way. The question I have is there a 3-color Defender deck, or are you always going to be limited to 2? And that's what we'll find out.
There's just so many ways to splash here. I think you're going to end up trying to jam. It's kind of like the Shrines deck, not quite as extreme.
Right.
You're frequently going to be like 3 colors, I think.
I can't wait to draft Defenders. Shalai's Acolyte is 4 and a white for a 3/4 angel at uncommon. It does have flying, and it also has a kicker of 1 and a green. And if it was kicked, it enters the battlefield with 2 +1/+1 counters on it. So you got a 5 mana 3/4 flyer or a 7 mana 5/6 flyer. You know what? That's not that great, is it?
It's okay. It's not super exciting, but it's in both cases you're not getting a great card, but you are in both cases getting something that is worth putting in your deck.
Yeah, like, it meets the bar, but it's strangely like a C.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's a C. Yeah, because look, a 5 mana 3/4 is not exciting, and a 7 mana 5/6 is not exciting.
No,
but having the option between the two, you'll be pretty happy when you get to cast a 7-drop. So
yeah, it's true. Okay, yeah, C for Shalai's Acolyte. Strangely, an uncommon angel like that usually does better. Argivian Phalanx. So this is 5 and a white for a 4/4 human core soldier at common, and it has vigilance, and it costs 1 less to cast for each creature you control.
Not super impressed with this. 4/4 vigilance is kind of dorky, and sometimes if you end up playing it, for 3 mana, it's not like you feel like you really did the thing.
Right.
The other ones, if you reduce the cost by 3, you're pretty happy. That said, this is one of the easier ones to really get going cheaper.
Yeah. I wonder if we just end up playing one of these in the tokens deck. Just as an additional payoff of paying a mana or 2 for a 4/4.
Yeah, I mean, I think you would put it in the tokens deck, but I'm not like confident that it's amazing. Whereas the other ones I'm pretty sure are great.
What do you think? Like a C?
I would say C minus on this one.
Yeah, it's pretty boring. Okay, a few artifacts, a few lands, and we are done. First artifact is called Inscribed Tablet. It's 1 for an artifact at uncommon, and it has activated ability 1, tap and sacrifice it. Reveal the top 5 cards of your library. Put a land card from among them into your hand and the rest on the bottom in a random order. If you didn't put a card into your hand this way, draw a card. So 2 mana, take a look at the top 5, and you can either just cycle it or get a land.
I'm not super thrilled about this. I don't really want to pay this much to try to fix my mana. Right. It is nice that later in the game you can get the buyout, right, of like of don't do that. But when you reveal, you can't choose not to reveal a land because it's reveal. So it's not that you just get the choice. It's only if you just miss, which is a lot worse.
Oh, really? Oh, I misread it. Put a land card from among them into your hand and the rest on the bottom and around. If you didn't put a land, because
it's reveal.
Okay, I don't like that.
There's a land there. I don't, and it's telling you to do it. I mean, I don't believe that you have the option to not do it.
Okay, yeah, I don't like that as much then. I mean, look, to me, this seems like the type of card that if you're doing 5-color domain, you're probably going to need to run an Inscribed Tablet to try to fix. That's it.
Yeah.
It's 2 mana to up your domain count, give yourself a chance to find, a land, a basic land. I'd give it like a D.
I would say it's a D as well. I do not think it's very good.
I don't know why these are in here, but maybe they'll play Vanquisher's Axe equipment deck. This is 1 mana for an artifact equipment. It's common. Equipped creature gets +2/+0, and it has equip 2. I just see with enlist, I don't see how equipment is great. I mean, I get it that you can enlist bigger, but that doesn't really ever seem to be the issue.
No, I don't think that's where you're at either.
I think you'd rather just have another creature. I would give Vanquisher's Axe an F.
Yeah, I think it makes Axe an F.
And
maybe some kind of tokens deck is really looking. Maybe
maybe.
But I'm not really believing that.
Right. Walking Bulwark is. Please have Defender. It's 1 mana. Yeah, 0/3 Defender.
It's a bulwark. Of course it has Defender.
Yeah, I know. That's why I thought that I saw the word. I still don't know what that actually means. But I know it means it has Defender. It's a golem with at uncommon. As I said, it's an 0/3 defender. Has activated ability 2. Until end of turn, target creature with defender gains haste, can attack as though it didn't have defender, and assigns combat damage equal to its toughness rather than its power. And you can activate this at sorcery speed. It's a traitor to the defenders.
So it only does it sorcery speed, so it's not like a defensive ability, but it can make itself into a 3/3. It can make your other walls attack. You can attack for 5 with the 0/5 looting wall, the academy wall.
Yeah. Funny.
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, you want, I'm assuming if you're all in on defender, walking bulwark is a big piece just because it's a 1 mana defender.
Yeah, I think that part is true. And then it makes your 0/5 walls into 5/5 walls. So.
Yeah. You could win with it.
Build around C.
It's kind of the coward's win condition, but yeah, I'll take build around C for walking bulwark. Hero's Heirloom is 2 mana for an artifact equipment. Again, this is an uncommon. Equip cost is 2. The creature gets +2/+1, and as long as the equipped creature is legendary, it has trample and haste as well.
Yeah, I just don't think the stats on these really line up, and you're not that flush with legendary creatures. Plus, trample and haste are not the biggest upside. So
yeah,
looks like an F to me. I don't know.
It doesn't. I just don't think the equipment fits. Like these are fine equipment. They're bred, they're baseline equipment, but I just don't see how you're like getting excited about equipment in the set. So we'll have to see. Salvaged Mana Worker is 2 for a 1/3 artifact creature construct at common, and it has the activated ability 1, add 1 mana of any color, and you can do this only once each turn.
And this doesn't even fix mana in the way that you want, because you want domain. You don't even want the colors. So yeah, this looks awful to me.
It's trying to be a kicker enabler, and I just don't think that that's how it works, because kicker's expensive and this only filters. It doesn't even add mana. So yeah, like F for Salvaged Mana Worker. Next is automatic librarian. It's 3 mana for a 3/2 artifact creature construct. It's common, and when it enters the battlefield, you scry 2. No.
Look, if you got to put this card in your deck, it's not the end of the world, but it's like a D+.
Yeah, don't send us a screenshot with this card in your deck, though. That, you got to do better than this. Relic of Legends is 3 mana for an artifact at uncommon. It taps to add 1 mana of any color, and you can tap an untapped legendary creature you control to add 1 mana of any color. Cute. This one actually helps you get those kickers going, but it still doesn't help with the domain.
Yeah, I'm not interested in Relic of Legends either. This looks like a D.
Yeah, I really feel like domain is where you want to be if you're doing all the colors, but maybe just random kickers.
Couldn't they have given us Skittering Surveyor? Would that have been too much to ask for?
Yeah, maybe it's still here. We're not at S yet. Oh, Shield Wall Sentinel still live. 4 mana for a 1/3 artifact creature golem. This one's common, and it's got Defender. And when it enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a creature card with Defender, reveal it, put it in your hand, and then shuffle. Oh my God.
This one is another build around C. It's okay, but it's still kind of expensive.
Come on, it's a build around B. It's a 2 for 1. It gets you your.
So you get a 1/3 defender,
right? But so it's a 1.5 for 1. But you get 4 mana for your 1/3. But you get your payoff, right? That's the key. You can get that white one that makes birds, or the mill one, or the black one, or whatever. So I think if you're in that deck, you definitely want Shield Wall Sentinel.
Yeah, I think that's probably true.
Joda's Codex is 5 mana for an artifact in uncommon. It has Domain. You pay 5 and tap it to draw a card. This ability costs 1 less to activate for each basic land type among lands you control.
I like this as a domain payoff. If you can play this and start using it for between 0 and 2 mana a turn, you're going to run away with that game fairly quickly.
Yeah, if you get to 0, you just tap draw a card, right? That's pretty dope.
And you can do that. I mean, I've certainly seen that happen. So
where's the happiness threshold with this? Because 5 isn't
2.
it? 2?
2.
So 3 is acceptable, 2 is happy, 4 and above is
Yeah. Well, so it makes it like a build around B. There's not that many decks that can use it, but the ones that can will be happy with it.
Do you have an alpha or beta Jam Day tome?
I do.
Oh my God.
I have 5.
What? Because to me, that's one of the most beautiful, just to hold in your hand
Well,
cards.
I got 4 for the old school deck I have. You got to have 4 for the blue white control deck, and then I just picked up another one at some point.
Good God. And we might have to talk. Meteorite is back. It's 5 mana for an artifact that common when it ETBs. It falls on something and does 2 damage to any target. It also adds 1 mana of any color.
This card's funny, but still not good. It's been reprinted a bunch of times. It's never been good.
Super flavorful, and it's not where you want to be. It's like a D or less.
Yep.
And then there is the last cards here are a cycle. Is it all 10? It is,
10,
right?
So they're all 10 lands. They come into play tapped and tapped for 2 colors, but they also count as those types. So Molten Tributary is an island mountain that taps for red or blue, and that's really important for these domain decks because
right.
you can have plains and forests in play, then just all of a sudden play Molten Tributary and now have 4 colors.
Right. So really important for domain. These are all common, by the way. Yep. Really, of course, just regular mana fixing important, but then also a really nice way to get free rolls on optional kickers, on cards you would play without it. But hey, if I happen to have my Radiant Grove, I can kick this card or whatever. So that's a lot of utility, for these commons. These seem to me like they're going to be quite strong.
They definitely are. There's also one more land.
Crystal Grotto.
Crystal Grotto. It's a land, a common, enters the battlefield, scry 1. It does not enter tapped.
Okay.
So enters the battlefield, you scry 1. It taps for a colorless, or it has 1 tap, add 1 mana of any color. And I've actually found this to be okay. The scry 1 really goes a long way.
Okay, you need it to, because Shimmering Grotto just sucks.
Yeah, and where this is also good is when you have like a blue-red deck that has a couple of the white kicker cards, and you're just like, all right, I'll be able to do this, or like a 4-color deck or something. So
yeah.
Jury's still out on Crystal Grotto, but I thought it was playable so far.
Okay. I also think that there's a big dividing line between, hey, this card costs 2 and a whatever, and then the kicker costs us an additional 4, right? Versus this card's 1 and a white, and it kicks for black, right? Like that's where Crystal Grotto can actually help you get the job done. But when the card costs 6 or 7, and you're trying on a kicker, then it's less good. What grade, by the way, do you want to give the cycle of lands, the duels?
Oh, they're like C pluses.
Yeah, that's kind of where I was thinking too.
Once you're in domain, they're closer to Bs. Like you should be taking them pretty aggressively.
There's one of them called Sunlit Marsh.
You basking in it?
Yeah, I'm like the Rootwalla. Okay, so there you go. There is Dominaria United hype, right? I mean, this set just has all the things that we love, kicker and domain and, all the expensive stuff. The cards are complicated. It looks really, really good, and people are very, very excited for it. And us limited players are kind of starving for it too, especially if you're a primarily paper player. You've had a long run with SNC and didn't really get a chance to play Baldur's Gate. And even if you did, Baldur's Gate wasn't like some amazing, memorable thing. So, there's a lot of pressure on this set, but it feels, at least from this first look, like it's going to be able to withhold it. It looks really awesome. And I'm stoked to get a chance to draft it, which I think we can do today, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because we can jump in the queue right after we're done with this.
Yeah,
that's going to do it.
Both on Arena and Magic Online.
There you go. What do you think of the set overall, Luis? What's your impression?
So far, I'm impressed. It looks fun. It's got a lot of the replayability elements. Like I said, the cost reducing build arounds, like at Common, I think really pay you off for going hard on what they're promoting, which is nice. Common build arounds are always fantastic. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of off color kickers that are kind of cool. The domain stuff is cool, especially with the domain aggressive component, which I think is pretty nice. So, I mean, who knows? Maybe, we'll circle back in a week and we'll figure out a little bit more about this. But so far, it seems like there's a lot of different color pairs, and I don't know which ones are going to end up falling behind. But if you count domain as a deck and you count all the 2-color pairs as a deck, and then you start looking at some of the 3-color overlapping synergy splashes, that's a lot of decks to start the format with. Yeah. And even if like 70% of them or 60% of them work out, that's still more decks than the average format, which I think is a really big part of wanting to continue drafting. A big reason that some of these formats have kind of felt lackluster is like, wow, there's 4 decks. That's just not that fun.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't wait to jump into the queue and lose to Elfhame Worm with some random pump spell on it.
That's going to be great. That's exactly what I'll be doing.
All right, that's going to do it for this one. Make sure you send us your screenshots of anything awesome that you figure out, combos, any of that type of stuff. We'd love to see that. And good luck in the queues. We want to thank our sponsors, channelfireball.com and FTX, for their sponsorship of the show. If you want to find all the latest and greatest Magic stuff, head on over to Channel Fireball. And if you need to manage your digital assets, FTX is the place to go to do so. If you want to find us on social media, I'm Marshall_LR and Luis is LSV. You can find everything related to this podcast over at lrcast.com, including links to all the shows you've ever done, plus, our social media stuff and any of the groups and anything, our streams, everything's over there on the front page of LRcast, along with all the episodes and all that as well. We want to thank you so much for hanging out with us. We really do appreciate it. And we'll see you next week with the Rare and Mythic Rare review.
All right, I want to start getting hyped for this event a little earlier than we have in the past, which is the LR versus LOL showdown, us against the Lords of Limited. I've already been in contact with the Lords, and we've started to figure out dates. They did task me to call Marshall and BK on their rotary phones and try to get them dates from them because you clowns have never logged onto Discord or responded to a Twitter DM in your life. But you know what? The predictions from last time were really good. I'm gonna work on predictions for next time to see where we're at. And I have additional good news, which is the trophy that Juan sent us with the piece of bread on it did actually survive the flood barely. So we've still got that to play for. But look for the LR versus LOL showdown probably in 2 weeks or so, something along those lines. We'll figure out a date. The week of the 12th is what we're aiming for, but no confirmation yet. And I'm looking forward to battling those guys in this multicolor nonsense format that BK is going to try to figure out mid-pack one.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that sounds like fun to me. And we'll probably just beat him again, right? Let's be honest.
We'll try.